Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. WeatherBrains episode number 797. This is for Monday, April 26th, 2021. And this is the pre-show, magical time of the program where we share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and we say outrageous things. And tonight we're going to look back on a generational tornado event. April 27th, 2011. That'll be the topic. Of course, we've done that for the past week. Last week, we focused on Tennessee and Virginia and areas north and east of here. Tonight, we'll be focusing on Alabama and Mississippi and the region down here where we happen to be. And so I'm going to really quickly get the embed code here. And if you're looking for the actual show content, move the slider about 5 minutes in. And it will be there. So let's invite everybody and get the gang on the show. Have a big crowd tonight. And again, we'll have a lot of stories and kind of a lot of emotion for us on this particular show because so many of us were personally involved in the event April 27th, 2011. So let's see here. Got to be sure I get everybody invited. And I think there we go. All right. So, yeah, it's been a hectic day today. It'll be a hectic day tomorrow with the anniversary itself being tomorrow. If you're watching this, of course, recorded, no telling when you're watching this, but we're doing this on April the 26th, 2021. And tomorrow is the 10th anniversary of the event. And I'll be doing a special, just me. And I told him I'd rather do this thing by myself. And I'd rather not do it on television. I don't want the restrictions of having to do a 28-minute show or a 58-minute show and take all the breaks and all those logistics. I'd rather just go on the live stream and Facebook Live and all the digital and social platforms and just just give me the ball. And we'll go through the day. We'll go through the science of the day. We'll go through the emotions of the day and what happened and honor the victims and everything. So we'll do that tomorrow evening at 7 Central. All right, Troy, how you doing?
I'm doing good, James. Thanks for asking, man. How are you? Hello, Bill Murray.
Hello, hello. Hello, Troy. We're both in Roach Motels tonight.
Yeah, we are. Unfortunately,
they're fine quality.
Unfortunately, you get to leave yours at some point. I'm stuck here until July 1.
That's true. I moved to another one tomorrow night.
Okay.
I don't know which is worse, Troy.
I don't know. I'm lucky to have a place to go. So.
Me too. Hey, Aubrey.
Guys.
Hey, Aubrey. Hey, Jen.
Hi.
I could tell the frustration in your voice, Jen, with the internet. I hate computers. I hate the internet.
Oh, it's so frustrating. It'd be one thing if it just went away. It would be fine. And then all of a sudden it would just drop out and it comes back and then it drops out and it comes back. I'm like, that's not working for me. And then I didn't have upload speeds, which I need for radio. So it was getting on my nerves and it's still not fixed. So we're fingers crossed here that I don't all of a sudden do that type of maneuver or I'll be on my phone.
Yeah.
It's crazy. How are you? You hanging in?
I'm hanging in there. I'm just looking for July 1.
I bet.
Yep. It's unfortunate at this point, things aren't happening quick enough. And everybody warned me, so there's going to be a time when people disappear and you're not going to see anything getting done because everything goes back order and all that sort of thing. And that's where I am now. So I'm just sitting here.
Yeah.
How many pictures of the super moon do you think people have sent me in the last 20 minutes?
Gazillions.
2.3 gazillion, exactly.
Yeah, right here.
And then they all kind of start looking alike after a while.
Here's mine, James, just so you can share it there.
Okay, there you go.
From my hotel.
I'm glad somebody sent me a picture of the moon. No, I'm honored anytime people send me a photograph. There's a gazillion weather people in the world. and they chose to send it to me, and I'm really honored. I'm flattered. So
Yeah.
I will look at all of them. I see Jason Simpson on the air. Just like the old days, we're back together again.
Like the Muppets, man.
Chris Darden.
Hey, Troy.
How are you, buddy?
Good. How you doing?
Doing great. And there's the one and only Nate Santa Claus Johnson.
So Nate, do you want to introduce all the new WeatherBrains, or do you want me to introduce them and then turn it over to you? What's better for you?
It would be easier for you two because I don't have all the notes in front of me, and my day has been nuts, and I've had a pretty significant thing dropped on me that has nothing to do with me, but it affects. I'm a downstream participant, and it's blown my day up. So it'll hit the news the next couple of days. You'll see it. But anyway,
oh boy,
yeah. So if you can introduce, and then I will my job here is to stay out of the way and just play traffic cop because I wasn't part of this day and y'all were, and it's your stories that people want to hear. So just keep an eye on the chat, and I'll just try and direct people. And otherwise, let's let you guys do 99.9% of the talking.
There's Kevin. There's Jim.
Good evening.
Yeah, we are piling them up tonight. Hey, Jim, you got a little bit too much sun there. Too much fishing or golf or what?
Hard work outside.
Yeah. Good answer, Jim.
That's the retired life there.
Yeah. So Kevin, give me a mic check, man. Talk to me.
Good evening, sir. How are you?
Loud and clear, booming through.
And here comes Alan. Hey, Jason, give me one more mic check.
How's it going there, boss? Check, check, check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
It sounds like we're professional broadcasters here. It sounds like you're on a phone instead of coming over the. How can I describe this? Who's an audiophile here?
Tell you what, sounds like when they lose the satellite to the Alabama radio broadcast and they have to go to a phone.
Yeah.
It's like you're on a boom mic and not the lav.
I've noticed that sometimes with the like different earbuds, if they don't connect right to the computer, sometimes you get that limited. It's a lower bandwidth transmission essentially.
Can you hear me now? Does that sound better?
That's better.
Yes, that sounds a million times better.
Okay.
You're good to go. I think everybody's good to go.
Hey, Troy. How are y'all?
Good.
Hey, Alan Gerard.
This is just like an old timers reunion here. This is like, I don't know what it means, but I do know there's a lot of brain power on this show.
Well, except for Aubrey and Jen, they're very young. So
that's true.
I appreciate that.
All right. And here comes Kim, and that means the whole gang is here, I think. Hey, Kim. There she is. All right.
Hey,
now we
Kim.
can start. Now we can start this party. All right. So here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Was something supposed to happen?
That awkward pause.
Oh, you guys can't hear the audio?
No.
Nope.
No.
Hear a word of it.
Oh, well, hang on.
I didn't know if I was supposed to start talking all of a sudden and fill in the spot on the line.
I was like,
here.
is it me?
Jen, that was your tease. That was your tease.
Exactly. I'm going to start talking right now.
You can tell I've got this thing all figured out here. All right, hang on. I think I know what happened. The soundboard had an upgrade, when you bring up the program. Can y'all hear this?
Now we can.
Interrupt this program for a CBS Radio Net Alert Bulletin.
All right. Yeah, that was my bad. Never press that upgrade button. I'm
I shouldn't have
delirious.
upgraded to iOS 14.5 today. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's it. All right, here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
WeatherBrains is brought to you by Midland Weather Radio. Every home, school, and business should have a NOAA Weather Radio, the official voice of the National Weather Service. And the AMS Weather Band.
Join the American Meteorological Society by becoming a member of the band. The AMS Weather Band is a global community of weather enthusiasts dedicated to learning and sharing their love of science. Visit amsweatherband.org to learn more and join the band today.
This is WeatherBrains episode number 797 for April 26th, 2021. And for most people in the weather enterprise, you start talking April 26th, April 27th, and memories kind of go back to what happened 10 years ago, and that'll be the focus of this program. And we've got a show just full of very smart people and folks that lived through a generational tornado outbreak 10 years ago. But let's bring in our regulars. Kim, it's always good to see you. You bring common sense to this program, and thank you for that in advance.
Well, that's wonderful to hear you say that. It is a really underrepresented quality, I think, in a lot of media today. So I'm very happy to have the opportunity to bring that. Very good to see you. And I can't even tell you how overjoyed I am to see the lineup we have in front of us tonight. This is brains times 20. This is incredible.
Yeah, it's an all-star cast for this one. And I think for a lot of us, we're just going to get out of the way and listen. That's my intent. Aubrey, how are you doing this evening in the lovely Shenandoah Valley?
Oh, I am fantastic. It's been a beautiful day. We've got a nice warm week ahead and finishing up the pieces that I've been working on. I think it's been about 2 months in spare time here and there. So working on those tonight on the next 2 days. So I'm very pleased with how they turned out.
Nice. Very nice. All right, Jen, Columbus, Ohio. How are you?
I'm doing great. Yeah, almost up to 70 today. We'll hit 80 tomorrow, so I'm excited about that. And just been busy. I've been very anxious about tonight. I've been looking forward to hearing the stories, but I know it's going to be a powerful night to reminisce about what happened 10 years ago. And it's just emotional just seeing everybody's faces. That and just hearing what's going to be talked about tonight. So I'm looking forward to hearing from everybody.
I am too. Troy, how's your situation? Are you starting to see a light at the end of the tunnel here?
Well, I'm still have to get the plug in for the Homewood Suites by Hilton in Northwest Austin, where I'm living until July 1. The repairs to the house following the winter storm are going along okay. A little slower now, but we still expect me be back in there by the middle part of the summer. So things are going okay. Best day ever, James Spann.
Okay. Most importantly, do they have the waffle machines back in service?
No, they do not. And they don't have the evening reception, and I need a bar somewhere. That's what I need.
Yeah, COVID has shut down, the little waffle machines. Of course, you can't travel anyway, but we have a Homewood Suites next door to the TV station here. And they welcome us to come over anytime because we're obviously good customers. But the waffle machine has been shut down. So that's, but if that's your only problem, we got no problems.
Exactly, sir.
So let's see here. I'm trying to figure out, Bill Murray, how are we going to do this? Are we going to let you introduce everybody, or Nate, or
that's the idea. I'm going to introduce all of our guest weather brains, and then Nate's going to take over and sort of serve as the moderator for the rest of the show. So if that's
let's
okay.
get going. We could be here for hours talking about this.
Yeah, this reminds me of one of those captchas, now where they tell you, like, click all the boxes that have a bus. Tonight is like, click the people who are in cheap motels, so that's, just click the top 2 boxes on the right and you'll cover us. Although none of these hotels are cheap, but yeah, tonight is a somber night for us to remember a terrible day in Alabama, Mississippi. History from a tornado standpoint. We've got several special people tonight. Jason Simpson, who was James's sidekick on that day back in 2011. He's the chief meteorologist at WHNT in Huntsville. No, you need to leave at 9, so we're going to get you in and get you involved quickly tonight. Jason, how are you?
Hey, things are great. We're rolling right along here. We've got so many newscasts. Worded edgewise doing anything else, but we've got a 9 o'clock newscast on our CW affiliate. So we'll I'm honored to be here with you all for just the short time that I can be.
Awesome. We'll squeeze us in between the 8:45, the 9, and the 9:15 news.
Hey, Bill, let me just stop. I got to apologize to Jason. I mean, I got to apologize to this guy. I mean, I've been working today on a I don't know, chronological segments of our coverage that day. And this poor man was in this building by himself for a couple of hours working a horrific, big time severe weather event that morning. I am so sorry. I mean, goodness, you did an incredible job. I've really not watched the whole thing. I've had to kind of watch it all to pull out the segments I want to use in this thing we're doing tomorrow night. And I just wanted to, number one, say, I am so sorry you had to do that for so long by yourself. And number two, you are darn good. I mean, you were excellent at 3:45 a.m. when you went on the air to start with. So anyway, just sorry and attaboy.
Well, I appreciate that. No need for an apology, right? We handled it.
Better late than never, Jason.
Yeah, there you go.
Tonight we also have the man who was the MIC at the National Weather Service in Birmingham, Jim Stefkovich, with us. He's retired now. And it's from all that hard work he's doing in the yard for Barb there. That's why he's got that great tan, not fishing or golf or anything like that, right, Jim?
Right. And I am the state meteorologist for Alabama EMA, so I am working some.
I forgot
But
to
glad
say
to be
that.
here.
We're so
No
glad
problem.
you are here. And his Sue at the National Weather Service in Birmingham, Kevin Laws, is with us tonight too. Kevin, how are you tonight?
Hey, Bill, doing great. How about you?
Oh, couldn't be better. Couldn't be better. Just down the street from Aubrey, about 45 redwoods and a couple of forsythias. At least like spring has finally sprung in Virginia, Aubrey. So I'm down the street in Roanoke tonight. So
All right.
not very far away.
Let me know if you want to stop in.
I'll be zooming by there tomorrow at about 85 miles an hour on I-81. I think that the number is really the speed limit. But also we've got the current MIC at the National Weather Service in Birmingham, Chris Darden, who was the MIC in Huntsville at the time on that horrific day. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks for having me.
It's good to see you here, and we'll be really excited to hear what you've got to say to us. Of course, Jen was working radio in Huntsville that day. I was blogging the entire day. And of course, James was in the middle of everything. And finally, tonight, we've got Alan Gerard. Alan is now in Oklahoma, but he was the MIC at Jackson that day, right, Alan?
That's right.
So we're excited to get your input here tonight. But I'm going to turn it over to Nate and let him lead the discussion for all the folks who went through that day. Nate, the show is yours.
All right, Bill. Let's start off with the TV perspective since we lose Jason at the top of the hour. And James already sort of mentioned that this was a two-part event. And one of the reasons that we feel like we had such loss of life, especially in the northern part of the state, was the MCS that came through. It's severe winds, took down some major transmission towers and knocked out power that took weeks to restore. And then that led into, a difficulty to notify people later on in the day. But Jason and James, let's have you start and tell us, and start, Jason, with your early morning. And sounds like you got to sign the TV station on ahead of the newscast and do some severe weather coverage solo.
Yeah, I woke up that morning at about 11 p.m. the night before, and just knowing what we were going to be in for, and CS coming across Arkansas, Louisiana, kind of timed it out in my mind. And I thought, well, we better go ahead and have a director in place around 3 a.m. just in case this thing makes it to us. Back then we didn't have we didn't have all the short-term guidance to really tell us what was going to happen with that thing. So as it kept maintaining itself, luckily I had Wyatt Carruthers in the building at 3 o'clock, and about 3:30, I think we decided to go ahead and go on the air with, or 3:45, as James said, I'm not sure which one it was, but we went on the air with that first tornado warning for Pickens County. And after that, it becomes one fuzzy memory. And James, you probably have a hard time too, unraveling the details of that day and remembering what time this happened and what time that happened. I managed this week to find a rolling with my wife, and the timestamps on that conversation, I could not have put those things back in order. The only thing I remember is we had the line in the morning and then the supercells in the afternoon. And I'm sure as we talk about it, it'll jog some memories, but there's a lot of it that just has become a blur over 10 years.
James, when did your day start?
Well, again, in my old age, I'm honest, I didn't expect the morning episode to be as intense as it was. You know, we knew there could be some storms and they could be severe, but I was not expecting that kind of organized QLCS with widespread wind damage. I want to say 5 people died that morning. The morning event by itself was a standalone, horrible situation. 5 people died, and we had 250,000 people at least with no power. And we had multiple tornadoes in addition to the widespread wind damage. And so, you know, I was trying, and you can't sleep before these deals. You just can't. And I was trying to catch a nap. I was trying to just sleep for an hour or two. And I did doze off. And I woke up with the, you know, I forget if it was weather radio or what, but quickest shower I probably had in my life. And I drove an excessive amount of speed to get down because I knew Jason was down here by himself. Nobody understands how hard it is working a severe weather event by yourself unless you've had to do that before. It's brutal. And I knew that, you know, he needed some help. So I got in probably about, 5 or 5:30 before the line got to Birmingham. Line got to Tuscaloosa about 5, Birmingham about 6 o'clock that morning. And we stayed on the air that morning until about 9. And as I remember, Jason, we stopped at 9 o'clock for that little midday lull and had to just, you know, pick our face off the floor and assess the damage we had.
Yeah, I'll never forget you looking at me. You made a tornado this morning, and we had a couple of EF3s that morning. The one that hit Coaling that crossed over Highway 11 was an EF3. We had the Cordova tornado that was an EF3. Had an EF1 that hit my mom's house in Holly Pond and hit several family members there. So the morning stuff was probably the most significant event that you and I had ever handled for the actual Birmingham television market. A couple of weeks before that, we had done April 16th, the Forgotten Outbreak, but that was more of the Montgomery, Meridian, Mobile market with just a little hint of our southwestern counties in the Birmingham DMA. So in the 7 years we spent together, that was the morning line alone was the most significant event you and I covered.
And we had an EF2 in the Birmingham Metro hit Cahaba Heights, and that was an EF2. So at 9 o'clock, we got off the air and we kind of looked at each other. And then I remember all the engineers they kept telling us all the stuff that wasn't working. We took a lot of infrastructure damage. We had microwave paths down. We had cameras down. We were struggling. And finally I said, guys, just tell us what is working. And they really did a good job during that little midday lull for us, getting a lot of that back online. And of course, not everybody had a midday lull. Nate, you know, our friends up in Huntsville, I don't think there was a midday lull for Chris and those guys up there.
Sort of an all-day thing.
You know, another thing that you did, we ended up operating off of your AT&T wireless card for a couple of hours before we ended up with Radar Scope, which was in beta. We were beta testing that on a Mac in the weather office, and that's how we did radar from the time the line swept east of Birmingham.
Yeah, we were struggling. I mean, it was a total struggle, but I don't know if people knew that, which is the whole object of the game. And again, forget all that stuff. We're trying to present a coherent message, a clear, easy to understand message. This is the danger. This is where it is. And this is what you need to do. And again, Jason did a masterful job of that when, you know, and when I got in there, there's no telling, I was probably like a bull in a china shop, but the morning thing is what really surprised me. I think we were all ready for the afternoon and for the evening event, but not the morning show. That was just too much. But Chris, you didn't get a break up there, did you? I mean, you had that Marshall County cluster going on mid-morning. How many tornadoes touched down in Marshall County? 14?
Yeah, it was a state record for most number of tornadoes in a single county. I'll jump in real quick, but that was probably the challenge in North Alabama was we had the morning, I just described as an inland hurricane that moved through, and we had a couple of fatalities with that. And then there was actually a midday line that moved basically from west to east, and that was not modeled at all. It was not forecast at all. And unfortunately, that hit Limestone and Madison counties really hard. And the area in northeast Alabama that lost power, they were done for the day. And then Limestone and Madison County, which obviously is a major metro area, they got hit in the midday storms, and then they were done. So you had, I think, counting Central Alabama, then North Alabama, I think it's 500,000 people that lost power by 11:30. They were done. So and not only did we not have a break at all before the afternoon storms, because we'll get to the Coleman storm later on, but that was basically an hour later. But people didn't have power. So, it was just a combination of just a calamity. I mean, it was not only did the staff not have any time to even reset, people just didn't have any way to get, unfortunately, didn't have a lot of ways to get weather information.
It's all Gerard's fault. He initiated this stuff. It's all his fault, clearly.
And I had a morning story too, Nate, because, I was like James, couldn't sleep the night before, because you want to lay down and get some rest, during that, 9, 10, 11 o'clock time, but I couldn't. I got up and looked at the radar and I thought, this thing is not going to weaken at all. And it had been a spring of overperforming storms, all year. And, you kept covering it and, watching it and just, amazed at the progress of it. But I had a ton of people from Hilton that were in town at the Hampton Inn at the Colonnade, which is right where this tornado that hit Cobble Heights, initially went through. And about 5 o'clock when the storm hit Tuscaloosa, I called the hotel and said, y'all are going to be going into tornado plan, in the next 30 minutes. And they brought everybody down, put them in the safe places, and, the storm went by and, the power's knocked out. These Hilton people, called me that morning and said, okay, Bill, what time are we going to meet? And I'm like, look, guys, we're not going to meet today. You got to get your cars and drive back to wherever you came from, get out of Birmingham, because, I fear this day is going to be, a day that will be one for the record books. And I have to go back to 6 days before we met Jim and James at the TV station. And I'll never forget, James and I were there talking, and you walked in, and James looked at you and said, have you seen these STP values for next week? And, I was like, oh boy, we're in a world of hurt. So do you remember that, Jim? That was for our NWA annual meeting program committee.
Yeah, I do, Bill. And in fact, as we all know, we knew about 5-7 days in advance. And then I remember about 3 days in advance, right around this time we were meeting, I literally got physically nauseous one afternoon thinking about this, and started thinking to myself, wow, is the Weather Service conveying all they can to let everybody know this is going to be as bad as it is? And some people have reminded me in the past couple of weeks, as I've done other interviews, only once in my career, and I've done thousands of briefings, I used the word, this is going to be Armageddon. And never used that term before or since. And it was, you knew it was going to be horrific. And so, yeah, it was bad.
And Kim, you've done some research. You have a very unique perspective on this because you didn't live through it, but you have lived through it through the stories of people who lived through it, and many, many stories of survivors of that day.
Yeah, I came in intending to do research, a case study of how people received, understood, and responded to weather information that day. And my main objective was in part to sort of get a baseline so that if we developed future technologies that conveyed more forecast uncertainty a little more clearly, could that help decision process? But the study ended up being a little bit of a reckoning for our whole field. People were so curious. I met Jim, met Chris and Kevin, and I think I met Alan at that time too, or nearly. I'd met you around that time, and everyone was asking, what happened? Tell us more about the public perspective. And there were so many interesting layers to the decision process people faced that day. One of the things that influenced people's decision making was actually the winter that had happened months before. You may recall that was a really, really harsh winter. And so there had, in North Alabama in particular, you had a number of snow days, because there'd been enough ice, snow that was weighing on people's minds going to this day. So in Alabama, after Enterprise in 2007, there was sort of this standing policy that if you had tornado watches up, school was probably going to be canceled. But because they'd had enough days out, they were trying to sneak in a half day of school, not thinking about the morning convection that might happen. And so as much as we were taken by surprise as a meteorological community by that, so were these school systems that were trying to do this sort of delicate dance around the event and time it as best they could to try to get some activity in. So when I was interviewing survivors in Northern Alabama in the Huntsville CWA, they were talking about how there were parents who had sent their kids to school. There were kids that were on buses when all of this was hitting, and they were trying to figure out, well, the schools are going to cancel now, right? How are we going to get our kids? What's the process here? And they were trying to dodge storms to get their children, and not knowing what everyone was sort of making up policy as they went. And it was a real nightmare for those people. Just starting the whole day was just this, it just to them felt like a constant game of whack-a-mole with so much that was coming constantly, and they were thrown off in more ways than with the power by the morning convection. There were a lot of families that were separated and displaced. And when you're talking about responding to potential tornado threats, family is the most important thing for most people to get together and to be able to be prepared to shelter. You need to have all that done, and to be scrambling is really being caught on the wrong foot was the wrong way to start that day.
And going back to the Birmingham office, Jim and Kevin, you guys knew that it was going to be a bad day. The morning stuff was probably not as well modeled and as forecast as we would probably expect these days, or certainly expected back then in terms of the computer modeling guidance and everything. How did your office, what was your posture going into that day, and how did the stuff earlier in the day affect downstream later on, your positioning, both in terms of a warning strategy and communication strategy, but also just a staffing strategy, just getting people into the office and managing what was going to be a really long day?
I'll go first and then turn it over to Kevin. So like everyone has said here, is the morning activity was much larger than we thought. And quite honestly, I mean, the staff at Birmingham did a great job, but it was a really thin line about being overwhelmed because of the staffing, because every office has a set number of staff, and you're obviously trying to optimize resources to get through the entire event. And we knew it was going to go well into the evening hours. So Kevin and I were both scheduled to come in later in the afternoon. And as James and Bill have said, you can't sleep the night before. And I was doing some interviews at home, radio and otherwise in the morning from the house. But Jason alluded to this. What a lot of people don't remember is that on April 15th, there were 45 tornadoes that occurred across the state, mainly Birmingham and Mobile's county warning area. So, I mean, we had just about got done doing the damage surveys just a few days before or a week beforehand. And so, that in itself was a long process, and staff were trying to recover from that. And Kevin, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, the thing that sticks out in my mind is that the morning QLCS was not well forecast at all, because if you remember the days leading up to it, you'd have them coming across the southern plains, making it to about the mid-Mississippi Valley, then they would die. And then finally we got our turn. And when's the last time you've seen EF2 and EF3s with a QLCS? I mean, it just has not happened. And I think the critical thing about the morning was, and we made a group decision, I think, probably around 10, 11 o'clock in that little lull that was very critical, because our office was being inundated with calls about, is this it? Everybody thought that was the event that morning, and that the morning was hell enough, right? So we made a critical decision to reach out and have a quick powwow with all of our emergency managers. And in these areas that were hardest hit, a lot of the Northwest that were going to be hit later, we knew they were going to be hit, the Hackleburg areas, Cordova. We had the emergency managers actually sent the police and sheriff's offices around on their loudspeakers, because nobody had power to let them know that this was not the end. And that was a very critical decision that we made that morning. I guess you can't really talk about how many lives you saved, but we had to do what we could with the resources that we had. You talk about using your internet off your phone or a wireless card. We had to just put together the best strategy that we could to try to save as many lives as possible, because we knew it wasn't over, and I think a lot of people thought it was.
Bruce Jones, I'm going to bring you in, Bruce Jones from Midland Weather Radio. And, you know, when we talk about extended power outages and that sort of thing, you worry about all of the communication infrastructure that we depend on, everything from, you know, cell phones and cell phone towers to weather radio towers and that sort of thing. And Kevin, you know, you talk about, you know, sending police cars out to, you know, put the announcement out on loudspeakers and that sort of thing. Weather radio, generally speaking, how did it perform on that day? Were there battery backups in places where they lost power? Did we lose any transmitters that day?
Yeah, you know, I'm not sure, and Jim Stepkovich might be able to answer. I know that we lost some major power lines, so you know, you got a power outage to the transmitter, but a lot of the transmitters have a diesel generator backup on them. So, you know, anytime I hear about a transmitter being knocked off the air the way these were, I kind of wonder if it's something a little bit more, maybe damage to the tower and maybe damage to the antenna that sits up on top of the tower. But, you know, I'm always reminded Keith Stammer, the emergency manager for the city of Joplin, said, you know, when you're having these tabletop exercises, make it as bad as you can possibly make it, because those things occasionally happen. And when I look back on this incident, especially that morning convection that knocked out power lines, big power lines, knocked out transmitters, knocked down radio towers, you know, it's like the guy on the Titanic who was up in the crow's nest. He forgot his binoculars back in England. If he'd had his binoculars, he might have seen the darn iceberg. It's kind of the same thing here. I mean, we just had that crazy morning convection. It was incredibly damaging to the infrastructure of the state. And you know, you guys did a wonderful job of getting the warnings out using everything that you possibly could.
And Alan, you're talking about this being an overnight event for you in Mississippi, and then sort of handing this off, and you had some staffing issues, you know, to deal with.
Yeah, I was just going to comment, you know, for the Jackson office, you know, our service area went all the way into Northeast Louisiana. So that initial round of thunderstorms was coming into the western part of our area before midnight on the 26th. And as everybody's already alluded to, it was obviously coming in more intense and farther south than some of the forecasts had indicated. And I still remember having a discussion. I was at home that evening, and the shift lead forecaster had called to talk about staffing, and he was saying, you know, that he was more concerned about the severe weather overnight being more than we had originally anticipated, but he was hesitant to bring a lot of people in, knowing how bad the next day was going to be. And, you know, my advice was, well, we know this one is going to be bad tonight because we can see it. I mean, it's coming, and the first goal is to get through this. I mean, we don't want to completely, I mean, we knew the next day was going to be extremely bad, but you can't not have coverage for what was clearly shaping up to be, you know, a high-end event that overnight, in which it was. In Mississippi, we had several fatalities and a lot of significant damage in that first event. So that's one of the challenges, whether you're talking about broadcasting, weather service, emergency management, is trying to balance all of these competing, challenges when you know you're going to have a couple of really big events and you only have a certain number of staff to be able to handle it.
Yeah. Chris, you mentioned we've got our little live chat going on here as we have this conversation. You mentioned that we did lose one weather radio transmitter, but the rest of them stayed up pretty good.
Yeah, the Coleman transmitter took a direct hit. Actually, we were monitoring the ABC 3340 live feed, and James was discussing it literally as the APT tower took a direct hit, and it actually took the Coleman transmitter down. Now, ironically enough, the next day when we were down surveying, the tower was laying in the parking lot, and it was still broadcasting. You could only hear it from about 100 feet, but the tower was still broadcasting, laying on the ground. So, but otherwise, the infrastructure stayed up pretty well in North Alabama. When cell phones started to drop off, I had no cell phone coverage whatsoever. When other things started to drop out, battery backup on the sirens went away. Weather radio stayed up. And I talked to a lady, and I won't tell all the stories, but I talked to a lady in Flat Rock, Alabama. She came up to me and hugged my neck. She said, "Weather radio saved my life." And her son survived. Her son survived in apartments in Tuscaloosa, and his roommate died. And she was telling me the story. She told me the story, but she literally hugged my neck. She said, "Weather radio saved my life."
Wow.
And she said, my son, by the grace of God, survived in Tuscaloosa.
So let's talk a little bit about the Tuscaloosa tornado, because I think, for one thing, I think that one of the takeaways, and I wrote about this in the NWA President's Message for this month's newsletter, was we talked about it a little bit, but we really realized how powerful live video. I mean, we knew it, but we had so much live video of tornadoes that day between, the ABC 3340 camera network and other live cameras. It seemed like, and in some cases we had multiple angles on the same tornado, depending if you put all the stations together, that sort of thing. But I want to hone in on the Tuscaloosa tornado, because that's the one that I remember watching live and watching James narrate this and call out street by street, intersection by intersection in Tuscaloosa as it's going through town. And after this event, I invited James to come and talk to the AMS conference on weather warnings and communication. James, you probably remember this. And you came out like a preacher, like an old time gospel hour type, Bible thumping. But at a point in that talk, you got really quiet. And it was about the Tuscaloosa tornado.
Well, and let me say this first off, I think if you ask people around the country what April 27th, 2011, that's what they say it was. It was the Tuscaloosa tornado. Before I even mention that, let me just say there were in my state 61 other tornadoes, other stories. People who lost their lives, small towns that people have never heard of before, Boley Springs and Webster's Chapel and Sawyerville. And I'm very sensitive about not leaving them out, because I don't think their story was ever told appropriately. But yeah, Tuscaloosa got most of the attention. And again, Old Shoe is the guy that really deserves the credit. Johnny, are you on here now?
Hey, yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. So let's bring in John Oldshoe, who's my old colleague. John and I worked together forever. And what you did, I don't think anybody appropriately thanked you and Greer. You need to tell the story about this septic tank guy, just fussing at. But people don't know the backstory. But John and Ben Greer, and understand this was 10 years ago, and they were in the middle of nowhere. And bandwidth is not that easy to come by in 2011. But they had this incredible live stream of this massive wedge tornado in this piney woods area of West Alabama. And that's when everything kicked in. That's when we were able to really know this was happening. Tornado emergency, imminent danger. This is a serious situation. You do something now. And if Old Shoe and Greer didn't have that video, the messaging would not have been clear. So tell your story, John.
Well, first off, thanks for having me on, old guy. Not that important anymore. But I saw Jason Simpson. He's somewhere over here.
Yeah, man. We're back together again. We're back together again.
I hadn't seen Simpson in forever. So yeah, that was. I've been semi-retired for probably a couple of years. I had some brain surgery and had to kind of go take care of that. And so I got back. I wanted to chase storms again. And here came this high risk day. And you were nice enough to say, yeah, sure, go chase, do whatever you want to. And we'd always, you, me, Simpson had always talked about hey, can we get a tornado live on the air? You know, the technology was just starting to get ready to do that. I mean, I think we were 3G back then. I don't even think we were up to 4G yet as far as
might have been
cell phone.
Edge. Who knows?
Yeah. You know, and the news directors always used to say, no, you got to, they pair you with a microwave truck and they'd want you to stop and do some pretty live shot with the wind blowing. And you pull my hair out. I'd come in, you know, back into that weather center always just cussing about, you know, oh my God, I was that close to catching it, but they made us stop to do the live shot. And so here I am. And you and I think share something, and that is that we love Tuscaloosa. A lot of our lives were spent, you know, I was born at Druid City. I graduated from Central High School. That's the place. And at the time I was living there. So I had my wife and my 2 kids. And so if there was anything that was going to happen that day, I didn't want it hitting Tuscaloosa, or I wanted Tuscaloosa warned. So I grabbed Ben Greer. He'd always wanted to go tornado chasing. And so, hey, let's go catch this southern storm. Nobody else is on it. Probably won't be anything. We drove down there and pulled up there on the Knoxville exit, and probably within 3 minutes, that tornado dropped right there at the bingo parlor there at the Knoxville exit. And we were, you know, I've never been good about giving you audio when I'm out chasing, and I'm sorry about that. I really like getting the storm. The audio isn't that important to me. Maybe I'll buy a separate cell phone. I know on these last 2 chases, you know, you've had video from me, but you didn't have any type of audio. But anyway, so the storm dropped. We fed that to you. I texted TOR to Jason. I think he relayed that to you. The audio was kind of mixed up because there was another team that was up on another tornado, but we got it straightened out, and you had about 90 seconds of the tornado. I don't know if it was 90 seconds or not, but it was a decent amount of time of the tornado dropping, becoming a wedge tornado, and kind of moving on past Knoxville there. So yeah, look at that, pulling it up. James Spann got the video up there. So that was what you got to talk over. And what did we think? That was probably about 30 minutes before the tornado got up to Tuscaloosa.
About 40 minutes.
There you go. So the idea that Ben and I had, James, was that field that you see right there in front of it was to kind of get out in it and parallel as far as we could. There was about 200 or 300 yards worth of field there because it was starting to get behind some trees. And we did. And then when we turned around, there was this guy screaming at us in an Australian accent and just bawling us out. And we couldn't figure out what was going on. So we got out of the car. He wouldn't going to let us move, and dealt with him, telling us they were going to call the lawyers on us. And we'd asked the bingo parlor owner when we pulled in if we could be there, and he was fine with it. Old farmer guy, you know, believe it or not, he owns this big bingo parlor, and he's got on the overalls from Hee Haw, and you know, it was you know, just classic Greene County type of stuff. But anyway, the septic tank guy, he had been putting in septic tank lines, and I don't know why he had to come from Australia to do it. He bought us out for about 5 minutes, cussing and hollering, and we got back on the interstate to chase that thing, go back into Tuscaloosa, and it had crossed over there near exit 69, you know, where the Lowe's is, and there was an 18-wheeler on its side. And so Ben and I, you know, have always said that was kind of our guardian angel, that mysterious Australian-speaking septic tank guy who, you know, cussed us out from getting on and held us from getting on the interstate and getting into that storm. So
we had somebody email us, John, asking whether or not you ever heard from this guy's lawyer or not.
No, you know, I went with Kim Cross. She wrote the big book on this, What Stands in a Storm. And she was writing for Southern Living or something. I don't know if she was doing research for the book or writing a story, but I got with her, showed her the vehicle we were in, which, by the way, I just sold like 2 months ago. It was a Toyota Highlander hybrid. And she put it in the book. I was like, what are you doing putting that in the book? But anyway, so we go down to the bingo parlor and wander in there. And the lady who runs the bingo parlor told us the guy actually was from England, and he was a pilot for the company. And I was like, so the guy who was the farmer has this company who, and it came to find out that he didn't do the septic tanks. He had just seen them being put in and knew or thought there might be a problem. He had no idea there was a tornado, or even that a tornado had passed outside. He just wandered out and saw this Toyota Highlander, running over the sewer line. So anyway, no, I don't know whatever happened to him. I always said that if I did find him, I'd buy him a steak dinner because he probably saved my life.
So we went from John and the Australian septic tank guy to Jason, who found that thing on the camera. Jason, and I want to hear your recollection of this moment where it got out of John's range and got into the range of that courthouse camera.
The moment that I saw it, I knew exactly what I was looking at because of what John had described, not only showing us in the video, but he was sending me more messages as follow-ups to it. So when I saw it and I was able to zoom in on it and I was able to let you know that we had it live on TV, my heart just kind of skipped a beat because I knew what was coming into Tuscaloosa, and we knew it was going to roll right over the heart of the city too, on the path that it was on. And, I had already had my kind of emotional moment for the day. So I was good to go. The morning round kind of got me. So watching that thing come in, I was able to keep it together a little bit better than maybe I had when it was headed right for my parents' house and coming right through my hometown of Coleman. So just, it's hard to describe. It's just hard to describe the feeling of fear that you have for those people and the burden that you feel in making sure that you call it right and that you communicate to them the imminent danger that your life is in your hands right now if you don't listen.
You did a masterful job of calm. You were composed. You were running the camera while you were talking. And none of us here, I don't care who you are, all these professionals here, or maybe somebody took a class. I didn't take a class on how to handle 62 tornadoes in one day when you got multiple, F4 and F5s down at the same time. You don't know how to do that. You do the best you can, but you did a masterful job with that. And again, looking back on that, 53 people died in Tuscaloosa. And again, let me just say this, and I'll quit talking because I need to hear from the Weather Service people. I want to hear from Alan because he's the guy that sent us all this stuff from Mississippi. But on that one day, 252 people died. There were 251 names. There was a baby born at 6 months gestation who didn't survive, born prematurely, did not have a name. And that's the only number that I care about. That's all I care about. And in Tuscaloosa, 53 people died. And I didn't even talk about this for 6 months, and that's all that matters to me. So as we look back on this, I want to be sure we do not forget these people. We cannot forget these people. People like Danielle Downs and Will Stevens and Lauren Brown, 31 Beverly Heights in Tuscaloosa. Read Kim Cross's book, and you'll know who they are. Think about Miss Minnie Ackland. She was killed in Tuscaloosa. And I don't even want to start going through these names, but we cannot forget these people. I will not let people forget them. And I'll just stop at that, Nate. Sorry.
That was the thing that struck me hearing you talking at the AMS meeting was you came out of this, this sort of fire and brimstone about, how important it was, what we do and everything. And then you got really quiet and talked about a couple of people in particular. And I think that's something that anybody who's worked an event like this, whether it's weather service or emergency managers or broadcast or anybody that's involved, you don't want to you don't lose people on your watch. I mean, that just, I think is sort of core to what we do. And there's some days where no matter how good you are, no matter how good the system works, we may not be able to get everybody. And I think that sort of struck everybody in the room that moment, however many years ago. Jen, you were involved in this as well. I'm going to bring you in a little bit to talk about, you were doing radio for a station in Huntsville and doing some live coverage of the tornado, of the severe weather earlier today in Huntsville.
That's right. Yeah, I worked the afternoon shift. I came in at 11:30 Eastern, and I took the handoff from the wonderful late Nick Wilchin, who had worked the morning on WRSA in Huntsville. And so he handled all that morning stuff. And he was there at 3:30, 4 in the morning, and then he handed over to me at 2. And I sat down and started talking. And the first tornado I remember is Coleman. And I just remember that and the squeaky printer kept going off and off. It just wouldn't stop for hours. And but I remember Coleman and reporting live on the air that people were trapped in the courthouse. And from that point on, I was sitting there and I couldn't get up. And it was hours upon hours that was happening. And the Weather Channel was, of course, doing live coverage, but I had to turn the TV off. It was one of those things where I felt like I couldn't focus if I was watching what was happening, because I needed to focus in on the Huntsville community and the storms that were coming in. And I didn't realize until just recently that because of the morning storms, the radio station was on generator power. So they were keeping their generators going so they could stay on the air during that entire time. And as Jason mentioned earlier, thinking back, it is such a blur. I don't remember much of what I said. You hope that what you said had an impact, and you hope that people heard your voice. And were able to take shelter. The next thing I really remember is talking to the guys, live or wall-to-wall coverage for hours. My best friend, Sally, who was in the booth next to me, Sally Russell, she went to Alabama. And so she's an Alabama grad. She's behind me trying to get my attention. She's like, "Are you okay?" And I just threw my hands up. I'm like, I don't know. She shoved food on the floor and something for me to drink. And so I had something there. And then the guys on Huntsville said, "Jen, we're going to go take shelter. We have a tornado warning. For our area, we have to go." So they left me on the air. Now, mind you, I'm in Atlanta, so I'm not being impacted here. They go and they take cover. And I'm now doing the coverage by myself, which I've never done in my entire career up to that point. And then they were knocked off the air. And that was the end of the coverage for me. They lost power. And I only knew through cell phone, we were trying to text each other. I couldn't get a hold of them, so I didn't know what had happened. But everybody was fine. From that point on, it was just sitting and watching the rest of the night and just trying to absorb it all at that point. I do want to say that Nick Wilchin in the morning and John Malone, who was the program director and the morning show host at that time, they were really good friends. He did write a story for Tornado Talk, and he said that the next day there was a lady who wrote, a listener who had been listening to Nick's coverage that morning, and she said, "Nick Wilchin saved my life," because she turned around based on his storm tracking. And got her, because she is in her car, and she was able to turn around and have safety. So I wanted to share that. He was an amazing broadcaster.
I'll say this as a theme before Chris goes. We all missed it. We all missed the day. People ask us, what was it like? What were the emotions? We didn't have time to think. It's like the guys that work the Apollo missions, the mission control. They missed all that history. I missed it. I was too busy. We were all too busy. So that's I think people need to understand that. We don't sit around just yakking away. There's a lot of stuff and a lot of moving parts going on at the same time. But Chris, you go ahead.
I was going to jump into what Jen said. A lot of people said that they didn't have access to TV. They didn't have power, but they had a battery powered radio. So they listened to the radio broadcast. I don't know what time of the afternoon it was. It was sometime 1, 2 o'clock or whatever. The phone rings. I pick it up, and it's one of the FM stations. And they said, "You're live. We're going to simulcast whatever you're talking about for the next few hours." So literally for the next few hours, they basically had us on the phone with them talking about the weather. And we just rotated from one forecaster to the other. We were doing radar updates. We were doing warnings. We were just basically telling people what's going on with the weather. And the next few days after the event, I'd go out and we were doing surveys and be like, "Hey, I heard you on the radio. You're the only person that we had access to in our storm shelter." And, it was what people could hear because they didn't have power. So hopefully it was helpful.
So I want to add to that. I think there were a lot of people that I talked to for whom radio was that lifeline you mentioned after power went out, or when you're in the shelter. And a lot of people wanted to have those visuals that you get on television, but they knew when the time came they had to be sheltered. And having that information you can get is so incredibly helpful, because there's nothing worse than sitting there and just not knowing. And It's frankly a little traumatizing. I can share with you guys, if I have the ability to do so, a page from my disabled screen sharing. Is it possible to get
I can make that happen. I am the magic person here. So
Sorry,
we're going
James.
to allow multiple participants to share. So try it now.
Okay, there we go. Are you seeing the graphic?
Yes, and you
All
might
right.
explain it for our listeners.
Yep. So what the viewing audience is getting to see is a graph from my dissertation where I recounted some of the summary findings of the interviews I did across, this is across Mississippi and Alabama, but primarily Alabama. And I think it's really important to contextualize this with some of that, nuance, but it's important to know some key things. A lot of people were tuned into TV. And a lot of that was because there were these great visuals you were talking about. All those visuals of the tornadoes were so helpful to people to know this is really happening. This is that day that I trust this message. And they at the same time were able to access maps to know that it could be them, that they could possibly be affected. And next to that, outdoor cues, just knowing the environment was turning, listening and being attentive to the outside was important. Sirens were a part of that environment. They were also very important. So as much as on the graph I'm showing, AM FM radio was about 25% of the people that I interviewed reporting that AM FM was a big part of their, information reception process. But underneath that is something really interesting. There were a lot of people who within their families sort of served as these information nodes and disseminators. So they would be listening to multiple kinds of information to get information about things happening in multiple places. And AM FM radio was really helpful as sort of a gap filler. When James would be covering one storm in one area, they could be on the radio and on the internet getting information about other areas. So even if it's an underrepresented sort of thing on this graph, that was a really important information source for people who were actually sharing information out to other people. So it's kind of part of the social cues column. And I say that just to say when you see graphs like this, where you see maybe a small bar for one information source, it's important to know that there could be a lot more going on behind that, there might not be a lot of people, but the things that they're doing to pass that message along can be reaching a whole lot of people. There can be ripple effects. So just thought that was an interesting thing that I saw. Radio definitely had its place, and this is the reason why in the disaster sciences, we kind of say it's an all of the above. And you have to know that going into an event like this, that there will be some things that'll fail, and there'll be people who find themselves in all different kinds of circumstances, especially when it's so spatially widespread. So hats off to you for keeping that as a really, important information source, keeping that going. Everything you did, I'm sure people were listening and you were saving lives as much as everybody else part of this communication chain. Everything was so needed that day.
I want to shift gears a little bit, but before I do, Jim, I want to come to you because you had another recollection about Tuscaloosa real quick before we shift gears to sort of the aftermath.
Yeah, one for me personally and then one for the office. So when we saw it on TV, and we had monitors like most offices had and have now, monitors that are monitoring the television stations. And I think it was the webcam from ABC as that tornado mile wide wedge is passing Highway 69 and barreling towards the university. For me personally, the thought was, okay, we said this was going to happen. It's happening. And I still can't believe it's happening. That was a thought that went through my mind. And then the other one was, and so you're looking at the Birmingham office, and Kevin can maybe add to this, you're looking at 8-9 tornadic storms on the ground at the same time. And so I remember somebody said, look, and we looked up the monitor and saw this mile wide wedge, and it became very emotional for us as a staff. And we knew people were dying. We knew people were getting injured. And again, having worked hundreds of severe weather events, I never saw the amount of dedication from the staff as this, and everybody realized, okay, everything's at stake here, and the professionalism and dedication, and just knowing I got to do my job and do it well, was amazing by the staff.
Yeah, and I had a Tuscaloosa story too. James, a few weeks ago, had this moment where he realized that the tornado was going to hit his house, and Karen, his wife. I knew that day that it was going to be a bad day. I alerted my son, who was a student at the University of Alabama, who was fairly weather aware, but was going to be here and there. But I stressed him by 4 o'clock you need to be in a safe place. And when I saw the sky cam, I literally jumped on the conference room table and was like, this is going to hit my child. And I had him on the phone and I said, okay, Chris, stay where you are. He was in the bathtub in his apartment. And, I was like, you just sit tight and, we're going to get through this. But I couldn't let go because I wouldn't know what would have happened. And we were frantically typing messages on the blog, putting stuff up as fast as we could. And, when the tornado went, the sky cam went down and the tornado went past, and, I knew from the next volume scan that it was up by DCH. I said, okay, you're okay? You're fine. Go out and tell me what you see. And he said, well, we're fine here. But he started seeing damage. And he was like, the words coming out of this, 20-year-old child's mouth were just indescribable. And he finally said, Dad, I got to go. I got to go help. And we didn't see him for 2 days. And he was, for the rest of his life, moved by that tornado. He still calls me anytime there's a cloud, as he calls it, what my grandmother would have called it. But we realized after it passed Tuscaloosa, this darn thing was coming to Birmingham, and we always usually evacuated our office. But I had asked Nancy Galloway to stay that day, and she was putting radar pictures on the blog for me. And I was typing the messages with them. And I suddenly realized I'd put her and me in danger. And we put all these desks together in this interior room in our office. And when, the tornado was, or the vortex was near the airport, so, all right, let's go in there. And we waited, to the next volume scan, and it was past us. And we came outside, and the darn, wall cloud was right there. And it would touch down just a few minutes later on the northeast side of Trussville and, roar on off into St. Clair County. But, it really brought it home that day. And I'll never forget going outside, when the tornado had passed Tuscaloosa, was not to Birmingham, but debris was falling out of the sky like crazy at our office, all kinds of stuff, insulation, pieces of houses. And the air had this sulfuric smell. And the lightning, it wasn't even like lightning. It was like a strobe. And the thunder had just turned into this constant crescendo. And, I thought, this is what Dante's Inferno, must have been like. And, but it was like back to work, because it didn't end for several hours that night. And like everybody said on here, it was just a big blur.
I will never forget seeing that video. I think my microphone just changed because my AirPods just ran out of juice. But, that day was just a blur for all of us.
Hey, James, I've got a quick question for you.
Oh.
All right. So I was in the field, and like you said, you kind of are not this witness to everything. But what I remember hearing as I was driving back into Tuscaloosa and hearing your coverage, and it's always kind of been a mystery to me, so I wanted to hear you talk about it. There was an issue with data being offset on the radar image. When did you realize that? What did you do about it? Tell me about that, because I wasn't privy to it.
Yeah, I had no idea. And again, it's my fault what you have to do. And I've learned from that you've got to have 2 radar sources. When you're working a severe weather outbreak, you got to have 2. The vendor had displaced the pixels by 5 miles. Jason, you remember this?
He left.
Yeah, okay.
Jason had to go.
Oh, that's right. He had to go do a newscast. So that, and when I was using that radar data, and I called out some streets I shouldn't have called out. And again, I've been very honest about this over the years. I believe that radar displacement error is responsible for one death, at least one, by calling out a street that I should not have called out. And that should never happen, but it can. And I really didn't appreciate that vendor and their attitude after it was over. They basically said, it's no big deal, blah, 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 blah. Don't you go down that path with me. And we're not a customer of that vendor anymore. I'll put it that way. But again, it's my fault for not having two sources. And that was a problem. And I realized it during the Tuscaloosa tornado, when all the video images did not line up with the radar we were seeing. And so I had to remember that in my mind as we went through the night of it. And understand, again, we had 62 tornadoes. Most of them did not have a camera on them. We had to use radar. And I had to remember this thing is offset by about 5 miles here, and we've got to account for that. So, but I realized it during the Tuscaloosa tornado. So, but again, lesson learned, you've got to have two sources. I don't care what vendor you use. I don't care. Any vendor can have a problem. And it's nice having your professional TV display here and a radar scope or something else like that, so you can kind of look at both of them. And I didn't do that, and that's my fault. There were a lot of things I did wrong. History will judge us for the work we did that day, and there were a lot of things that were done wrong. And again, I still struggle on spending maybe too much time on the Tuscaloosa tornado when I should have been spending more time on the Cordova tornado. But you had that incredible video. We had this Cordova EF4 that was just as big in Walker County. And yes, we mentioned it. And yes, we put the warning on there and people should have known. But still, I don't think we gave the Cordova tornado enough attention. We had one coming through Blunceville at the same time. We had all these tornadoes down at the same time. And it's really sexy. The natural temptation is just to focus on the one that's hitting the big population centers. And I just wonder if we did a disservice to some of the smaller communities. And I forced myself to watch a lot of it in the last 3 days. I've had to edit this thing we're doing for tomorrow night. And again, I can't play mental gymnastics with it. I'm a little cog in this big wheel, but there's a lot of things that I could have done better. And we just have to learn and go from there.
I know that my opinion doesn't matter that much anymore, but I want you to know, I always have thought you have been way too hard on yourself about that. A lot of things went right that day. And a lot of people, like Kim was saying, watched us and watched you and got to the proper place and everything. And understand you wanting to always, revisit that and try to always remember what the few things that did go wrong, like you say. But I always think you've been way too hard on yourself. That's just me to you.
Well, and I appreciate that. And I do think there needs to be a time where we are cognizant of the people that survive because of the warning process. Somebody at the Weather Service pressed a button. Somebody on TV or radio communicated the message. We do need to celebrate that. I'm just not ready to do that yet. I know it's been 10 years, but I think once I finish, I'm trying to memorize the names of everybody that died in my state. And that's a lot. I was hoping to have them all by this date, and I don't, but I'm working on it. And once I kind of get that done, I think I'll be able to go into that phase. I'm just not quite ready to do that yet.
All right.
I think it's fair to say that an event like this, going back to the where you position things, we had the same thing on April 16th. And I think in this case, you went to where the video is. I mean, I think the tendency in television is to go where, if you got live video or something, you start with that. Right. And I think that's part of the tension that we deal with from the TV side when we've got damage video or something that you want to show this live video of either the damage or of the tornado happening. And even if it hadn't have been in a populated area, you still would have, you probably would have stuck with that, even if you had a tornado in a populated area without a camera, although that's certainly unlikely. But I want to shift gears a little bit because Chris said something in the chat, and I think this is, I want to spend the rest of our time together talking about this, because the people that cover these events, the people that work these events, from the Weather Service to broadcasters to emergency managers to everybody in the process, they're people too. And you have an event like this, something that I think we've become a lot more cognizant of in the last 10 years is the mental health toll that an event like this can take. And we're more plugged into it now. I think we're more aware of it. We're more open to talking about it and acknowledging that this can weigh on you. And Chris, you said that after this event was over, you spent a month writing down all of your thoughts and memories from that day. what you could remember piecing the stories together? Tell us about that.
Nate, I didn't do it right away. I sort of kept it bottled in, and it got to me, and it probably wasn't in a good place for quite a while. And fast forward many years, the March 3rd, 2019 event happened in Lee County, and that was a very bad situation for me, quite frankly. And I spent all night writing my thoughts about it, and it helped. So over the last months, I've kind of been writing my recollection leading up to the 10-year anniversary. And I think it's kind of helped for me personally. I won't go into a lot of details, but we are people. I mean, we're scientists, but we're also people. And I think we sort of keep a lot of things in. Sometimes we sort of, my wife, a lot of times she's like, well, what's wrong? What's going on with you? And are you okay? And our default answer is, oh, we're fine. I'm fine. I'm okay. But when you hear the stories, when you go out and do the post event, you see so many things, and it does sort of weigh on your shoulders, a lot, and it's really, really hard. And James says he obviously carries that weight very heavily. And I think a lot of us do. I won't tell a lot of stories, but I remember one specific time in the afternoon on April 27th, I looked over at Brian Carcione and I said, people are dying right now. And it was, I just, I didn't know what to do. You sort of feel helpless.
Jim and Kevin, you did a lot of storm surveys right after this event. How did that affect you? How did the work in this event and then seeing the aftermath, how did you deal with that?
I think for me, it's just strangely, I don't know if I've ever dealt with it personally like I should have. And there was sort of a slide for me, and this was the top of the mountain, and I've been on a downhill slide ever since. And the events since then have really impacted me, and I really think it goes back to that, me trying to deal with April 27th. And Chris can probably add into this. He and I both, I think we took Lee County in 2019 very hard, and I think you think, well, only 23 people died versus the 252 before, but I think it's all just it just builds and it builds and it builds. And I think I think James, you and I have talked about it before too. It's just like, how many more of these events can we do that somebody else has to die in, and it just continues to find. I think if I'm forced into an early retirement, that's going to be the reason why, is because it keeps building and building and building. And I'm never able to really deal with it effectively. And Chris, can you talk about Lee County a little bit too? I know that's off topic, but there's something about these events that have happened. I go back to the night of January 23rd, 2012, and I think that was the first fatality that we had in the state since April 27th. And it started right there with the 16-year-old girl there in Clay, Chalkville area, and then it just has built and built since then. It's very difficult.
I'll let Jim jump in about April 27th, but we're put in positions in the Weather Service sometimes that we're not trained to. March 3rd, I was down there hours after the event, and I come up on a scene with state EMA, and there's a young boy. He's just sitting there. He's just beside himself, and his sister comes over, and she said, "Do you want me to show you where I found my mama?" And she said, well, most of her. And her mom was sitting there, covered with a sheet. And then the next house down, we find, me and Ricky Adams find part of a body. I don't know that we're not trained for that, but that's part of our job, I guess.
Jim?
Yeah. So Chris and I did several combined presentations, both across the Southern region and nationally after this event. Both of us brought in crisis counselors, separate, of course, and to talk to the staff. And, you know, for me personally, I'm thinking, I'm not a first responder. You know, I haven't seen the things that Chris has seen since then, and or I'm not going out there but I didn't realize I was suffering from PTSD. You know, you know, when a counselor just described it, it really helped me, but it didn't make it easier. It is absolutely positively one of the reasons why I retired as soon as I could, as soon as I was eligible, because as Kevin and Chris have alluded to, people are so thankful when you're doing damage surveys, but to continuously see what you see, it wore on me. And the other thing I think that happened, it was nothing major, but after this event, for probably 2 to 3 years, I was barely able to take care of myself, much less my staff, and God knows my family, what I put them through. And so little things issue cropped up because the wheels keep turning, right? The bureaucracy for all of us keeps going. There's day-to-day operations, and there's mandatory training, and other things need to be done. And so life moves on for people who've never experienced this, but you're still dealing with it. And so, you know, because of that, some of the staff issues cropped up, and I just wasn't able to handle them probably the best way I could have. And you know, some issues got resolved and everything is fine, but yeah, it takes a toll all the way around, emotionally, physically, mentally.
Yeah, I just want to add real quick that I realize this, you know, tonight is about 2011, but since you asked Nate about, you know, trauma and, you know, all of us being human beings, where I really first had that really brought to me was after Katrina in Mississippi. That event was, you know, was really a turning point, I think, for myself in realizing that, you know, like as Jim is saying, you know, a staff of scientists, you know, who, you know, that's what they're trained to do, is to deal with the weather, but they're not trained, as Chris said, to deal with the emotional impacts. And, you know, Chris talked about his exchange with Brian during the event. One of the things that I'll always remember about Katrina was the day before the hurricane made landfall, was our warning coordination meteorologist at the time, Jim Butch, who has since passed away, in my office crying because he and basically saying, I know what's going to happen tomorrow, and it's, you know, and I don't feel like there's anything I can do about it. And, you know, we obviously all know what ended up happening the next day. And that event was just such a, you know, such a prolonged event with such long-term impacts beyond and similar. Yeah, I just want to say what we dealt with on April 27th in Mississippi was terrible, but it, in my opinion, what happened in Alabama was an order of magnitude, you know, worse. And the kind of impacts that Alabama dealt with in April 27th was the kind of things that we were dealing with in after Katrina in Mississippi. And that is something that goes on for weeks and months. And I remember talking to both Jim and Chris after the April 27th event and encouraging them to, you know, to take the mental health implications seriously, because you go back to 2005, and back that far, we were even less aware or prepared to deal with that kind of, you know, situation than we are today. And I'm glad that Jim and Chris did such a great job of educating the Weather Service and the broader community about the mental health impacts of an event like that.
Jen, you mentioned that when you were working this event, you were you were out of market. You were in Atlanta, but covering it for a radio station in Huntsville, and a coworker, a friend of yours, looks at the booth and sees you in there, and are you okay? And your answer was, you didn't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't, because I don't. It was too much. There was so much going on, and then after I was off the air, you feel kind of like you don't know what to do with yourself. And then the night's still going. So then I started watching the television. And then after that, I felt like I should be helping somebody. I felt helpless. And I'm like, I got to help somebody. And so Sally and I put together, we had asked people to start giving. Can you donate to us? We were going to take it somewhere. Excuse me. And because she, went to Alabama, we found an organization called Tumors for Tuscaloosa, and we drove to Auburn and with our Alabama shirts on, and we went down there and we just donated. And that's what we wanted to do. And then I decided to sign up with my church to learn how to be an emergency person who gets sent out. It's all I can do to do. I will be honest with you, though, as I'm sitting here listening to these conversations, I don't know that I ever properly grieved or dealt with my personal emotions of being on the air until we started writing these stories for Tornado Talk. Because so much of it, you kind of block it out, or you just don't remember, or you move on to the next event. When you're working at a radio network, you're on many markets. I currently cover 65 cities. So you go to the next market, and it's not that you forget, but you just become you kind of detach yourself a little bit, I think. And maybe that's not the greatest way to handle it, but that's, but until then I started delving into these stories, and I'm now reliving the day. It's actually gotten me several times reading these stories and realizing how many lives were impacted. And I think I might be 10 years later now going through some kind of a grieving process, because some of these stories are really getting to me, and they're just really, my hope is that as I continue to read and delve into these, that it's helping people, as they're learning these stories. But I'm hoping it's going to help me become a better broadcaster as I continue to just focus in on loving these communities as I try to tell them, their weather, whether it's sunny or stormy, that they are heard, and that they hopefully will stay safe if they can hear the sound of my voice or something. But yeah, that's my experience.
James, you've had to do this April 27th. You've had a couple of events this year. I mean, it seems like there's we're seeing a lot of events in Alabama, and you're covering a lot of them. How do you deal with this?
Well, I think everybody on here is right. Most of us come from a physical science background. My first major in college was electrical engineering, and I finished in meteorology. I don't know anything about, being a counselor. I don't know anything about human behavior. I don't know anything about social science. That's why I'm so glad to be friends with people like Kim here. But dealing with it, I think the most important thing is just immerse yourself into the people that you serve. If they allow you to, learn who they are, learn their names, talk with some of the survivors. I know a lot of the surviving family members of those that died. And again, I've got 252 people that died here. I don't know how many Allen had in Mississippi. I'd love to know the count in their neighboring state here. But you talk with these people, and you laugh with them, and you cry with them, and you become friends with them. And again, I don't know what to say sometimes, but I can listen, and I can laugh with you, and I'll cry with you. I'll pray with you, whatever you'd like for me to do. I'm just here. And that really helps. And I think we can help each other. And that's just one way. And I don't try and, invade somebody's privacy. I don't be some creeper. Hello, I'm the weatherman. I need to get into your life. But the truth is, if you really start to meet some of these people, they want to talk with you. And some of them you become close friends with. And most of the things we talk about are really, really private. This is something where you don't want some promotion guy from the TV station rolling the cameras. No. This is way off that. It's private. It's none of your business what we're talking about here. In fact, a good friend of mine, we're going to lunch this week. His 8-year-old son was killed April 8th, 1998 in an EF5. The whole family was lofted. This man is paralyzed, my friend, and his 8-year-old child at the time was killed. and just horrible situation. But we've been going to lunch since 1998, for what, 23 years. And it helps us both. And I always thought I was supposed to be the guy that encourages him, but the truth is he's the guy that encourages me. So to me, that's one of my ways of dealing with it. It's to just get to know some of these people and just establish a relationship with them.
Kim, you mentioned, or James mentioned you, and I think, you were in the field talking to some of the survivors after this. How are the survivors dealing with an event like this?
Gosh, there's so many layers of trauma on all sides. And I love what James was just saying about how people who've experienced this in different ways can come together and share and have that healing that goes on. Before getting into that, I want to comment really quickly on, I sometimes feel that the social science part of this is almost it's something that, as Jen was saying, she tells stories as a way of honoring the people who went through this. And that's kind of how I feel about the work that we do in the social science side. But it's also part therapy, an attempt at being a piece of this reconciliation with the field of meteorology. And I have to say, the goal of having 0 deaths in the face of disasters like this, it's laudable. It's a wonderful thing to want. It's something about forecasting. We can see the future that makes us feel that we have this power, right? And we should be able to save people. And I sometimes, as the social scientist, have to play the role of saying, you might know the future, but you aren't actually God. And it's a distinction that's important. And you can go, what's important is to have your heart poured into your mission, to do it with everything that you can. But just like doctors performing on the operating table, at the end of the day, we have to know that human life on this planet is fragile. And that's something that we have to reckon with. And we put ourselves in these professions to do the best we can. And you're providing a service of care sometimes for people in their last moments of life. And knowing that you're doing something that is providing that care, it's a cloak around them of protection that they take with them into the next phase of existence. And that is a beautiful thing too. And I think going out into these communities, I almost feel a little bit guilty because I come in at a point where I've never experienced a time talking to survivors where they're anything but so elated to share about the goodness of humanity, because they get poured into by their neighbors, by strangers coming by. I was speaking with a gentleman who was much like, John, you were talking about, the individual owning that establishment that you'd sort of sat outside, and very, very similar overalls, the whole 9 yards. It's the kind of guy who doesn't cry, and he was sitting in his, FEMA trailer in tears, just overcome with gratitude for the people who would come by and giving him things. And he was offering me water and snacks. And, he was filled with an abundance. And I think that's important for us to know too, that sometimes catastrophe and disaster offers people the opportunity to pour into you. And sometimes that's the point. We all need to have a need created for other people to come in and provide for us. And that can be you having a need actually gives somebody else a chance to give. And, doing the social science piece of this, I always come away feeling 100% bolstered in my faith in humanity, because it's in these times that the best of humanity comes out, and people are dealing with trauma, and it is very difficult. It's hardest for me when it's my own backyard. And like I told you all when we were discussing a couple weeks ago, we were discussing, I think it was the North Carolina event that preceded this. I shared the story of, May 20th, 2013, when that tornado hit, and it was just up the road from me, and my church became ground zero for response. And, after that, the Weather Service, when they asked me if I could do the service assessment, I said no. And it was too close and too personal. And so there are some times you are the human and you have to draw a boundary around, I can't be a scientist in this space. I have to be a human in this space. And in this case, I'm part of that community response, and you can't do both. And that's where sometimes I feel so much for you who have to go back to TV and have to go back to the Weather Service forecast office every day. And like you were talking about, you have, Jim, you have to run the grids and keep on keeping on. That is a very, very difficult thing to negotiate. But I do want to say, and I will keep saying it every day of my career, that I'm so fortunate to get to do this work. For forecasters that struggle after these events, just know that you, by being present, are doing something so, so, so valuable in those moments. And no matter what the outcome is, you did the best that you could.
That seems like a pretty good place to transition to final thoughts here from everybody who lived through that event. Bill Murray, we'll start with you.
Myself here. Yeah, Nate, turning to my colleague and saying, I'm going to be going to Tuscaloosa with a body bag, to pick up a body tonight, was just such, just an unbelievable experience. And then just the, elation to know that he was okay, but that everybody south of him was in a world of hurt. And when John sent the first pictures, from the corners of McFarland and 15th and Tuscaloosa, it was just like, this is just unbelievable. And I went out to Pleasant Grove a couple of days later. A friend, invited me out and knew all the neighbors, and we walked the whole community. And when Kim was saying what she said, it really brought it back to me, because she used the word elated. And when I first heard that word, I thought that sounds so strange there, that a stranger would want to tell me their story. And like James said, you don't go up and just, invade their space. You just, they seek you out. And in my case, they sought me out because they knew my friend from church. And the stories were just unbelievable. But in almost every case, they were, stories of, of God's mercy and gratitude, and helping others. So it was truly an experience for me. And I had one other fun story out of the whole thing. This lady took me up to her house, and she said her house was, fairly unscathed. And she said, Bill, tell me how all this stuff, and she took me inside the house, and she had like, little twigs and checks from somebody in Tuscaloosa and all this stuff that was in her home. And, she said, how did this get here? The home looked like it was perfectly intact. And a few days later, she called me back and she said, our contractor figured it out. The tornado lifted the roof of the house long enough to, blow things into the, from the outside, and then put the roof back down. And I thought, we have all these amazing stories of the power of tornadoes. And, this would have been some oddity, if we'd seen it in the 1932 outbreak, it would have been on the cover of the newspaper, how these tornadoes do these things. Now we're, beginning to understand them. But, after I walked that neighborhood that day, I didn't ever want to see another tornado in the rest of my life. And it was that January 2012 outbreak that Kevin talked about that snapped me out of it, because that young lady should not have perished that night. But that's that's what happens. But this has been really good for me tonight too, because this is a really hard thing to deal with, and I've appreciated what everybody said. And Kim, I thought what you said was very meaningful tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, Bill, I guess I'll go next, and I'll start by just you talking about the oddity of the situation with the debris being blown in the person's house. I mean, I commented in the chat that a lot of that day was just a blur to me, but I'm, as we're talking through this, I'm, remembering certain things. And one thing that does really stick in my mind is after the event, when we were doing the damage surveys over the next several days, I was on a tornado path in southeast Mississippi, which killed several people southeast of Jackson. And I got a call from one of our lead forecasters who was up on surveying the damage from the Philadelphia, Mississippi tornado, which was the first EF5 that day. And he called me and he said, you need to come up here and look at this. There's ground dug out of there's sod and ground dug out of the ground. And I was just like, I don't understand what you're describing. And he said, it looks like the tornado just dug a trench in the ground. And I was saying to him, did it drag something? And no, it was, and I finally said, okay, well, we'll come up there tomorrow and look, because you can Google this on the internet and look at the pictures from it. I mean, the tornado literally dug down to the point where I had to climb down into a trench, from the soft ground just being, churned up by this EF5 tornado. And that's just one example of so many things that happened that day that were just, almost would have been unbelievable. I mean, the number of reports we got of debris falling out of the sky from eastern Mississippi that day was just unreal. And I'll never forget, you talk about getting focused and in the zone. We dealt with all of this, and I know James has kind of, jokingly said we sent it to y'all in Alabama, but the reality is once it moved across the Mississippi state line, we were giving it to you all and we weren't worrying about it anymore. And I still remember when this last storm finally moved east of Mississippi, and I had a chance to kind of stand up and look up, and we had a monitor in our operations area that had the Weather Channel on it, and they were showing what was going on, what had just went on in Tuscaloosa and Birmingham. And I had no idea that any of that was, I had no idea what was going on in Alabama until that moment. And just the sinking feeling of realizing the magnitude. I mean, as bad as it had been and what we had just went through in Mississippi, and just watching 5 minutes of coverage on the Weather Channel, I knew what we were going to be hearing out of Alabama. It was such a surreal moment. And it just does go to what Kim was saying. You just have to, when you're in the kind of roles we are, meteorologists, broadcasters, emergency managers, it really is in many ways like a doctor. And I know that the public doesn't really think of it probably that way very often, but it is, the reality is all we can do is the best that we can do. And we, one of the things I always used to tell forecasters before when I was a meteorologist in charge is, we're going to miss things, but we're going to learn from them so that we can do better next time. And that to me is the important part of all of these sorts of professions, whether you're talking about meteorologist, doctor, you have to learn. And I'm lucky to be in a place now where I work with Kim, and we're trying to learn things to help keep us moving forward.
Yeah, it's a good segue because I look over the totality of the last 10 years, and to sort of see the things that came from this tragedy that may or may not have ever come from something like this, and the integration of social science into our business, the funding with projects like Vortex Southeast, and all of the things that have come to help us learn, and I expected a question sort of what's the best thing that's happened since then, whether it be technology wise. And I think that's something that gets overlooked a lot too, is having, not from a social science, but from a physical science, having that dual pole radar now and being able to see those TDSs and be able to communicate that and stress it on live television. That's been a game changer. We didn't have it in 2011. In fact, the Birmingham radar got upgraded in March of 2012. So it was less than a year later that we have that. But just think about how that has really changed how we do business now. And we take it for granted because it's been around for the last decade. But all the things that have come directly from this tragedy, the awareness, the amount, Bruce, you can attest to this, the amount of weather radios that we've sold in this state and given away. In fact, there's been several counties that got FEMA funding just to give away a weather radio to everybody who lived, every person, every business in the county. All of the storm shelters that have been built since then, and just the things that have come from that, trying to take lemons and make them into lemonade. But I've been very appreciative, even internally, the way that our office in Birmingham does business now, as far as how we focus around severe weather. None of that happened before 2011, and the things that we do now that are so different because of this event. So, even though it was a tragedy, like Al said, the things we've learned from it and the things we've taken from it and applied to what we do today. And it's not always been 100% successful, but I think we're in a lot better place than we were in the days. It's almost like that demarcation zone. Everybody talks about 9/11 in 2001. This is one of those for weather folks. It's just like that, the times before that and the times after that. So I'm really appreciative of that. So thanks for having me on tonight. I really appreciate the conversation.
Okay, I'll go next. I mean, first thing I'll say is that I want to say I appreciate my wife Kay and my daughter Chloe. When you're in this position, your family's supposed to come first, and sometimes that's not the case. And they've been very understanding a lot of times when plans get changed, and Dad all of a sudden has to run out, and he's not at certain engagements or homework time goes away or whatever. So, and my anniversary is on April 25th. It was yesterday, 23rd anniversary. So as a meteorologist, it's hard to schedule anniversary events in the spring. So especially end of April. So I don't know how many times we've had an anniversary engagement get changed or something. So I appreciate them. So, but I'll tell a quick story, and this is a positive story. It was a Saturday after the outbreak. It was April 30th. Andy Cool and I we had surveyed all day in Jackson and DeKalb County, and it was just nothing but carnage. I mean, road after road after road of just carnage. I mean, so it was getting late in the afternoon. We come up on County Road 295 in Higdon, Alabama. We come up on this farmstead, and it's just gone. I mean, everything's gone. I mean, there's nothing left. And we see a lady and her two children are just cleaning out what's left of the home there. So, we park and walk up, and the first thing I said to the lady, Annette Perry, I said, first thing I said, I'm really glad you guys weren't home. And she looks at me and said, we were home. So I'm looking around for a storm shelter. I said, where's your shelter? She said, we didn't have a shelter. And I'm like, well, where's your shelter? Where'd you shelter in the storm? She pointed right in the middle of what was left of the home. I'm like, Andy and I are looking at each other like, can you explain a little more? She laughed. She said, we were monitoring the weather. We got the tornado warning. We didn't have a good place to shelter. So we knew to put as many walls between us and the outside as possible. We got our two children. Tony and I got our two children. We covered up. We got in the hallway. And she said, all hell broke loose. She said, when it was all over, everything was gone but us. She said, we lost our cattle. The plumbing was gone. And she said, you see the flooring right here? She said, the carpet got pulled up. The carpet got pulled up, but we remained. Andy and I looked at each other and were like, that's just a God thing. And I looked, I said, Annette, I said, God has a plan for y'all. I don't know what it is, but James talked about the people you keep in touch with. I've kept in touch with Annette and her family through the years, and she's got a grandchild, and they run Clouds Pizza on Highway 71. So if you're ever up in Northeast Alabama, please stop in the Clouds Pizza, Higdon, Alabama. Tell Annette and Tony I said hello. And, that's a positive story. I mean, it's a God thing that they're still alive today.
Well, there's a biblical verse that says iron sharpens iron, and everyone in this Zoom meeting, we sharpen each other all the time. And I'm all these things are running through my mind, brings out a lot of emotions. I feel like the Lou Gehrig story, consider myself one of the luckiest guys on earth. I mean, having to work with such great people, both in the weather industry, folks like Kim, Bruce Jones, Bruce Thomas, these guys for the Weather Service. So, a lot of positives have come out of all this. And I think, going back to, and I give all the kudos in the world to Kevin for engineering, but, Birmingham is one of the best performing severe weather offices in the country now. And I give them a lot of props for that. The state of Alabama has done a lot. You can't build a new school, or you can't add on to an existing building now unless you have a safety room that can withstand 250-mile-an-hour winds. That's a positive. We have a long way to go with building codes across the state, whether that's a mandate or whether people need to take it upon themselves. That's a discussion for another day, but we got to do more to reinforce our homes. But I think we're getting there, and even with new construction. The dedication I get to see from everyone on here, and now that I work with emergency management, to see what they do at both the local and the state level, it's overwhelming, the passion, dedication to help other people, and that's still a fun part of what I still get to do. And finally, I just love the new concept that Birmingham is starting. It's called Be a Hero, and I've heard James talk about it, other folks. It's a wonderful concept, and that is, don't assume everybody gets the warning. Make a call to a loved one or a friend, and we start getting the entire community involved to get the word out. And now it's just not the Weather Service or media or social media. It's everyone in the community getting involved to let folks know what's going on. And I think those are all very positive things.
And let me just say this. I don't have any interest to people thinking about me. I don't care. I mean nothing in this story. To me, this is maybe one of the saddest stories, but at the same time, I think we should celebrate this child. This is Ari Hallmark. And I bet you maybe Chris has been to Ruth, Alabama. Chris, I bet you've been to Ruth in Marshall County when you were at the MIC in Huntsville. This is Shane and Jennifer Hallmark and their daughter, Ari. Lived in a lovely little community called Ruth. And Ari was in a home with both parents, her two parents, her grandparents, and a cousin. They were all killed except for Ari. Shane and Jennifer was killed. Ari's grandparents were killed. Her cousin was killed. And Ari's this amazing young woman today. Had a chance to speak with her at length, and she's got a remarkable outlook on life. She struggled with this, like goodness, we all do. I cannot imagine at that age struggling with what happened to her. But again, just be thinking about these survivors, and they hurt, guys. They hurt just as much today as they did 10 years ago. The pain is real. It is visceral. If you pour your life into their life, you can just feel that pain. So as we just reminisce this event, I'm not that interested in me or my thoughts. I'm just interested in people remembering those survivors of the ones that were killed April 27, 2011. And let's not forget. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Nate. I've got to run do some television.
John, any final thoughts from you from that day?
Oh, no, one of the things, Nate, that with James just talking about that and everybody recounting that, I had one single mission there, and that was to go catch the tornado live. And once it was done, I success, I got it. That's it. It's been interesting to hear everybody else who had to go throughout that day, beginning to end, and then dealing with the victims. And I don't know if I've ever sat back and just listened to that and thought about it. Mine was such a solitary mission and was done. I got done. And then I went to check up. My family lived in Tuscaloosa at the time. My wife and my 2 kids. I went and checked on them. They were fine. I breathed a sigh of relief and then helped with a little bit of cleanup around Tuscaloosa. But so this has been a little bit cathartic for me, and also kind of brought it home a little bit. How large this was. I guess. So that's been helpful to me. One thing, you guys all know storm chasers, and I just want to say this real quickly, and Kim kind of pointed this out, and James too, about being able to see a tornado live. And so we did that with this tornado. What I've run into is I've been storm chasing a little bit, especially here during the spring, is kind of this, I don't know, this attitude that they don't have any responsibility. And if you know somebody that's a storm chaser who, and that, that's a very large term. It encompasses a lot of people doing different things. But I'm talking about these guys who think they're professionals, who are going to upload the video, who are going to sell it the next day to CNN or whatever. Those guys need to be broadcasting that stuff live. And I don't know how to change kind of I think it begins with us as just, meteorologists and broadcast meteorologists and National Weather Service people too. If you bump into those guys, try to impart some type of responsibility into them that it's fine for them to get video and sell it, but at the moment they need to be getting it live and passing it off to a broadcast meteorologist or somebody in the weather service so that can be put in live and get that social, science back into it where the public's seeing the tornado. Because a lot of these guys are putting up their drones, they're capturing video, and then they're selling it the next day, and they're just not doing anything productive. I mean, are they being a productive member of society? That's what I want to know. That's the question I would ask. So I'll get off my box, but I just bumped into some of these guys, and I saw their drone video, and my question to them was, well, what were you doing when you were doing this? I mean, were you giving it to somebody so they could show it live? And they looked at me like I was nuts. And so anyway, I hope they get to that, and I hope we can talk to some of those guys and convince them to do that. So that's it.
All right. Jen Nairmore, final thoughts?
So I was just thinking, as a very, very amateur tornado historian now, and looking back, there have been horrible, awful tornado events forever. And throughout every single one of them, there's been people injured and loss of life and loss of property. And the thing that comes out of every single one of them is the recovery and the community that rally immediately to help rebuild. And that is the stories that I just love. And it's the human spirit in every single story, whether there was one tornado and it killed one person, or somebody lost their farm, or an event like this that is a generational event, and there's so much that is going on, and it's tragedy everywhere. It's the human spirit and people's hearts. And I think that when I look back at this day, and we continue to, with Tornado Talk, delve into these stories, we continue to hear people tell their story 10 years later. It's just like they just went through it. And then they're telling us this, and they're still getting choked up, but then they're still saying, but I was blessed, or this happened, or this person showed up and then they saved me, or they, helped me in some way. And I think the one other thing I want to share too is the new, I'm trying to figure out my words here. The first responders. I don't know how they do it. Those who are, whether they're the firemen, coming out with the EMTs, and the things that they're having to deal with and see. My heart goes out to all of them, and how much of just a great respect I have for them. And just looking back on this event, how they all came, they just do. People just do. And that's whether you're a, first responder or you're a person's neighbor, you just go do. And you get out of your house that may have just been wrecked and you go, who can I help? I got to go save somebody. I got to go help somebody. You just do. And I think that that's how we need to proceed as we move forward, because we're going to have horrible events that happen and we just have to do. And we have to just continue to broadcast. We have to continue to try to help people and do the best that we can. And as meteorologists, we are, it gets me because I people say it all the time. Oh, it must be great to be paid to be wrong, laughing at you or whatever. And I just chuckle. That's not what I'm doing. That's not what any of us are doing. We don't want to be wrong. I don't think people realize our hearts are humongous, or we would not be in this business. And that we love people. We love the weather too. And we're intrigued by it, but we want to help people and do our best to, just to save lives, but also, just help. And so I'll end it there. Losing my words here at 11 o'clock at night. So
thanks, Jen. And I think you sort of touched on how, everybody who we've talked to tonight had a different role to play. You had weather service, and broadcasters. I know there are emergency managers that listen to this program, and everybody has a role to play. And it's only when we work together and we play our roles and we do our things all together that we become greater than the sum of the parts, and we're able to do great things. And while I think it's fair, to think about the people we lost 10 years ago, I also think it's fair. I lost count and how many stories were told tonight about how many, so-and-so saved my life. So-and-so, such and such saved my life. I heard that multiple times tonight. And this is just with this group, and the work that y'all do saved lives that day. And I know James doesn't want to focus on that, but I think there's a story there as well. Thank you all for sharing your experiences. And I've seen a lot of wiping eyes and pulling down glasses and whatnot. This has been a powerful couple of hours. And I would say this to anybody who's listening, who's been hit by this. And by this, I mean the conversation, especially if you've worked events like this. Talk to somebody about it. Have that conversation. This is heavy stuff. And we didn't know what we were dealing with until courageous people like the people on this podcast 10 years ago said, something's going on. I need to talk about it. And we've done a lot in the last 10 years about bringing attention to critical incident stress and post-traumatic stress disorder and things like that show up in this community. I don't think we're doing enough, but we've got a great start. And if you've listened to this and it's been powerful for you, have that conversation, start to talk about it. You're not alone. This is normal to be human and to have feelings and to go through to cover events like this, whether there's severe weather or whether it's hurricanes or snowstorms or fire weather, anything like that, and to know what's happening when you see these colored blobs on radar moving over populated areas. That's tough. You're not alone. And reach out to somebody, reach out to anybody on this podcast. I'm sure we'll all be able to chat with you and certainly direct you to somebody who may be able to help you more professionally, but you always have an ear with us. So thank you again, everybody, for sharing your stories tonight. This has been a very powerful couple of hours. With that, Bill, I'll turn it over to you for recorded segments and picks of the week and all that good stuff.
Thank you, Nate, for an outstanding job tonight, moderating. Just the perfect hand on the wheel there tonight, Nate, and we really appreciate that. This is the point in the show where we would play the AMS Weather Band commercial, so we'll get JP to insert that later for our recorded folks that will be listening on the audio version. But if you haven't joined the AMS Weather Band, now is a really good time to look it up on the internet and join, because it's something that should have been done a long time ago for weather enthusiasts. The AMS is very inclusive and bringing enthusiasts into the organization, and have a lot of things they're serving up there for the members. I've really enjoyed my membership already, and they've got some really cool benefits for being a part of that. So I encourage you to do that. And this is the time of the week where we talk to Bruce Jones. Bruce Jones, tonight's entire show was a commercial for Weather Radio. And you, as Midland, of course, the largest producer and seller of those life-saving devices, are providing an incredible service to the people of the United States and Canada.
Yeah, Kevin was mentioning that you can use FEMA hazard, the emergency managers can use FEMA hazard mitigation grant money to purchase NOAA weather radios, and a lot of counties have done that. Unfortunately, a lot of that happens in the aftermath of a tornado, because that's when the FEMA funds are released and become available. But you know what? As long as we're getting more devices out there and giving people more ways to receive these watches and warnings, I'm all in favor of it. So I deal with a lot of emergency managers on the state and county level, and work with them to get these NOAA, these FEMA grants, and put that money to use. They can use it to build public shelters. They can use it for buying up land that's prone to flash flooding or recurrent flooding, et cetera, et cetera. But FEMA puts billions, with a B, billions of dollars into this mitigation, and trying to build out our build out the United States of America to be more weather ready. So hats off to FEMA, Homeland Security, to the emergency managers, and to everybody in the weather enterprise working so hard to get multiple and redundant ways of receiving these warnings out there, because that's what gets the job done. And, I don't know what the population is of Mississippi plus Alabama combined. It's got to be, 5 or 10 million or 8 million or something like that. But I'm sure on April 27th, 10 years ago, that almost everybody in both states knew that something bad was going to happen that day. So a lot of good messaging was done. A lot of very good messaging and broadcasting was done.
Bruce, you'd been proud of me last week. Our general manager in Alexandria, Louisiana, had a bunch of other hotel people come by and get their new weather radios and have me program them. So they put me on the spot, Bruce, and I knew how to program that darn thing. And I was really grateful. So I won't say that I didn't look up a YouTube video featuring you on there before I had to meet with them. But so I wouldn't look too silly. I've got my notes right here in my notebook. But they're easy to program, easy to set up for your location. And as we've seen here tonight, they're just literally tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of cases where people's lives have been saved by them. We appreciate what you do as the ambassador. You got a special offer for WeatherBrains listeners.
Yeah, for those of you who enjoy WeatherBrains, we have a special offer. If you'll go to midlandusa.com and use the promo code SPAN25, that's SPANN 25, SPAN25, then you get 25% off on purchase of a weather radio or sorted little products like that. So it's just something that we'd like to do to thank you for being a WeatherBrains listener or viewer, and also to encourage you to tell your friends and get the word out. Turn around, don't drown. When thunder roars, go indoors. Have a NOAA weather radio. These are things we constantly have to keep reminding people of. And we appreciate the fact that you, as Weather Ready Nation ambassadors, are taking on that mantle and responsibility and getting the word out. NOAA weather radio saves lives.
Well, thank you, Bruce. And we were mentioning, Jim said, that we're often the brunt of jokes that say, we get paid to be wrong. And Bruce, you pointed out that, a 300 batting average in the major leagues will get you in Cooperstown. And I noticed tonight on the Braves game, the MLB batting average right now is 236, Bruce. So that should make us all feel better.
That's got to make us all feel better.
Well, all right. Well, thank you, Bruce, for your support of the podcast and for being a great member of the cast. Wanted to bring you in early this week because this was just a great opportunity for you to hear some of these stories. So let's do a quick weather roundup. Troy Kimmel, what's the weather like in Austin?
It's been, we've been in the mid and upper 80s the last couple of days, and that's kind of where we're headed. We have this next upper level storm system and associated cold front, which will approach us midweek, Wednesday into Thursday. Little bit of a Storm Prediction Center meteorologists have us in a slight, a marginal risk area, rather, maybe by mid into late week. But as usual, these fronts moving across Texas in mid and late April, they get a little more sluggish. And at some point, they'll quit progressing this far east. But we're thinking maybe an inch of rain, Bill, before it's all over and done with. We had some good rains last Friday in parts of the area down to the southeast of Austin, upwards of 4 to 5 inches in an area where we were forecasting about a ½ inch. So we kind of missed that one a little bit, but we're hoping for maybe another inch this week. Beyond that, it's looking pretty dry for South Central Texas. Even the 8 to 14 day outlook is calling for above average temperatures and below average rainfall. So we're got our fingers crossed for rain midweek.
Well, it's great to see you, Troy, and thank you for being here tonight on this very special show. Yeah, we got about 1.5 inches of rain this weekend. It was nice. And then some interesting storms rolled in on Saturday, Kevin Laws. We were downtown at the Sidewalk Movie Cinema watching some documentary shorts, and I looked at my radar and I told my wife, we're going to miss the last one. We got to get out of here. Because all these poor people in this theater, they have no idea what they're going to walk out to in 15 minutes. And we ran to the car, and boy, it was coming down and hailing to beat the band, and was rocking and rolling in downtown Birmingham. Kevin, what about next? What's our next system going to be in the central Alabama area?
Well, it looked like as strong as we started with a severe weather season. I don't know if this is going to go to out a little bit of winter, and then we're going to transition into summer. But it's just we probably got one more left in us, but we've got one more at least decent cold front. I think probably on Friday, Saturday, and if you believe the GFS, another decent shot of cold air coming in here, almost getting close to the lower 40s again for late April, early May here. So one more shot of cold air, but we'll see if we can hang on and then transition right into summer like we normally do around here.
Well, thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for everything you do, Kevin. Jen Nairmore, I heard you mention an 80 in there. Summer's coming early to Flavortown, huh?
I'll take it, since we had a couple inches of snow last week and it got on my nerves bad. Here it is at this thick snow, and I'm like, what's going on? And then my poor trees just look sick, and it's just, we're very spastic up here right now with 80, and then now we're going to be at 60 for the high on Friday. So we're all over the place up here, but it is April and May in Flavortown. That's just how it goes. I really don't put away the long sleeves or anything until maybe mid-May. And then I feel like maybe, okay, now I can start getting the shorts back out. But yeah, been all over the place up here, but that's all right. It was a beautiful day today. It was gorgeous. So tomorrow looks good too. I'm going to go have lunch outside with my mom. So that's the plan. Enjoy the 80s.
Well, that's outstanding. Thank you for your input tonight. It was
Thanks.
It's really amazing hearing your side of the story too from that terrible day. Jim Stefkovich, always good to see you. I guess we've already recounted all the weather in central Alabama. Nothing really to add there. Any other things you want to add tonight?
No, just thank you for inviting me and going through this. I couldn't watch videos for a number of years afterwards. Really didn't want to talk about it, but we get an opportunity to continuously train people about weather hazards, and that's a positive. And so, we keep plugging along and saving lives and property, and that's what we do, and I'm glad we do it.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And I was thinking, some of the stuff we've been talking about here tonight. It was cathartic for me because Jen asked me to write a story for her Tornado Talk website, which is incredible. And so as I sat down to sort of recollect my thoughts and put them down electronically, and besides all the typos and other errors that Jen found, along the way, trying to say that the Thursday was the 20s, whatever, the wrong day and all these things. But, it was something to go back and pull all those memories together. 10 years later, it seems like it just happened yesterday, but April 3rd, 1974 seems like to me that it just happened yesterday. Because as a little scared sixth grader, that was, the event that sort of brought tornadoes into focus for me. So It's just pretty crazy. Chris Darden, we're so glad you're here tonight. And I was thinking yesterday about you. Did the UAH Armor radar see TDSs on the April 27th outbreak? Because I know just 3 years before, during the Super Tuesday outbreak, they had discovered that was a thing, right?
It's funny. I think I put that in my write-up that I put on social media, but it was. We actually saw the TDSs on the radar that day, and I think Chris Schultz and some of the other folks there actually published a paper, and particularly the Higdon tornado that I mentioned earlier. The story I told. There's some really good research done on that. Actually, that tornado. I went back and looked. Kevin and I were talking a couple of days ago about it. I went back and unfolded the data this afternoon, and the rotational velocity with that one was 238 miles per hour. That was probably the second. That and the Tuscaloosa tornado were probably the two strongest that I saw that day. That Higdon tornado was probably an EF5. There was just nothing that we could rate it a 5. That's probably another tornado that day that honestly probably was a 5. But yeah, that we actually did see. We did have access to dual pole that day.
Cool. That's an incredible tool now. We use it daily and it's really important to us. And I'll ask Kevin. Kevin, do you think that the Tuscaloosa to Birmingham tornado might have been an EF5 at some point in its life?
Yeah, no doubt. The maximum damage that we rated, I think it ended up being 195 or 198. I don't remember, but it was right there as it was leaving town, and then it went into the Hope Peterson area there, and really doubled in size. And to this date, maybe El Reno was standing. That's the highest Doppler 88D velocities, was 298 miles an hour rotation. That was in that wooded area there. I believe it hit that Hope Peterson cutoff train bridge there. Remember that big train bridge, that hand riveted bridge there, and all that got destroyed. But I'm almost 100% positive it was an EF5 for sure, in that wooded area between Concord, Pleasant Grove, Concord, and the Tuscaloosa city limits there. So,
Jim Stefkovich, I noticed you unmuting there, but you got something to add.
Yeah, Kevin, can you remind me? Wasn't the rotational velocity 140 miles an hour at 10 miles high over Tuscaloosa? I seem to remember that.
Yeah, I believe it was. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was interesting to me. Someone was recounting a story to me somewhere near Hurricane Creek. I think where you never think of a railroad bridge as a damage indicator, but they mentioned that right before the tornado came, that a fog seemed to rise, and I assume that's some sort of lift that was occurring right there in the vicinity of the tornado, condensing that very moist air. And I always thought that was a very interesting story. I don't know if anybody else has ever seen anything like that, but the people that went through it remembered that very clearly, that a fog began to rise right before the tornado came. And I thought that was pretty amazing.
I've never seen railroad tracks that were bent into big U shapes. They were actually touching end to end and things like that, and just things I've never seen before. I think that the train ties, the wood pieces that go under the track, I mean, they were finding those like 10, 15 miles away from the tornado. I mean, I don't know. Those things are heavy. Those are not light. Obviously, they got to support a train in the track, so they were being dug up out of the ground and slung 15 miles away. That's just incredible.
Yeah, I saw an actual video compilation today on YouTube that I had not seen before. Someone put together all the videos of the tornadoes from that day, including Mississippi and Alabama. There's actually a video, looks like somewhere maybe on the east side of Tuscaloosa, where there's literally like large pieces of buildings flying out of the updraft of the Tuscaloosa tornado. I had not seen that one before. I mean, it's large. I mean, like vehicle-sized debris coming out of the updraft, like being lofted. That's something. I mean, we know that happened in the Phil Campbell Hackleburg tornado, but I had not seen that in the Tuscaloosa one until I saw the compilation today.
Yeah, just absolutely amazing stuff. Alan Gerard, we sort of emerged back into more stories here, but Any weather to talk about for you and Kim in Oklahoma, and any last thoughts?
It's going to rain out here, which we're usually always happy to see, although it's been kind of wet here the last week or so. But a little bit of a risk of severe weather the next couple days, but considering it's late April, nothing too unusual out here. It was interesting listening to Troy talk about the dry weather in South Texas. I mean, we really are lucky to have gotten some rain out here, because you don't go too much further west of here, and it's a significantly different situation. I know I was following some of my weather service friends in New Mexico posting some of the satellite pictures of the large wildfire that developed out there. And I have a lot, if we're talking about current weather, my biggest worry right now is the drought, from South Texas up through the Southwest and into California, and hoping that we don't have a summer that just makes that worse and reinforces the forest fire or the wildfire situation. And so hoping for some rain for people not too far west of here, because I know looking at the models today, it looked like a fair amount of hot and dry weather for the next week or two. So hopefully that's not a sign of things to come.
I know it's going to be 85 here on Wednesday, and Chris just mentioned that he hates drought. I hate drought too. Drought is a terrible thing, and hopefully that won't happen.
We might have our first 90 here. I was just going to say, we might have our first 90 here sometime in the next 10 days. And we have a colleague that works remotely for the lab in Phoenix, and they're expecting their first 100 this week. They almost made it a few weeks ago, but it looks like they're going to get it this time. So
Kim, any other Oklahoma weather wisdom? I love getting the Mezzanette's ticker every week or every day. It's always fun. How does he come up with this stuff every single day, day in, day out?
I can't fathom. I don't know, but what a wonderful storyteller, and yeah, he's just delightful. I think that really sums it up well. We were eyeing severe weather threat, for the next couple of days, but it really looks like things will time out such that it's more west of us. It's one of those days that if I didn't have really young children, and I mean my boss is in the room, so I shouldn't say this, just take the day off and go storm chasing, but it's a great day to do some dry line chasing tomorrow. So, I don't wish tornadoes on anybody, and even hitting rural areas, that's someone's livelihood, and I very much respect that. Now having that family though, I'm always a little bit grateful when I don't have to think about it for me being as much of a concern. I cleaned out my storm shelter this weekend just in case, and I know that Alan did too. We were getting everything prepped, and we're ready to go in case tomorrow, if there is something random that goes sideways. You always have to be watching. But yeah, grateful for having a little bit of rain. It was nice to have that nice soaking rain last week, and just hoping that the fortunes can be with our folks to the west. Drought, and there's a little bit of conversation going on in chat about this. Drought is quite a bear. And if I'm remembering right, when I went out, I drove out to Alabama and Mississippi in 2011, and I think that I crossed a very flooded Mississippi River, but it was from snowmelt, and while it was really flooded, it was also a drought at the time, wasn't it? In Mississippi, weren't you all having a really profound drought? And it was almost this bizarre juxtaposition, like there's all this water, but it's from snow. There'd been just this crazy winter, crazy snowpack in the north that melted, and Alan put his mic down to chat about that. Just everything about 2011 was otherworldly and extreme.
We didn't even go there, but for us in Mississippi and in the Jackson office, we went right from the April 27th event to record Mississippi River flooding. And that was a 6-week ordeal of daily briefings for FEMA and the states. And and it, like you were saying, Kim, it was very interesting in that we had this record flooding on the Mississippi, but yet, especially for the areas like from Interstate 20 south, it was actually drought. So we were dealing with flood on the big river, but drought on the the areas away from that. So it was a very strange spring into early summer. But that was, we talked a little bit about the staff stress. That was one of those things where, somebody mentioned the forgotten outbreak in mid-April. We had another big tornado outbreak, severe weather outbreak in early April that nobody remembers, but that was actually a pretty significant event. And so we had all of that in April, and then we went right into Mississippi River flooding. And I know I remember talking to colleagues in the Memphis office about, just the prolonged nature of the weeks of storm surveys and recovery after April 15th and 27th, and then going into several weeks of high-end flood operations, because that was when there were significant concerns about the levees potentially breaking. And so we were ready for all of that too. So it was something else.
Somehow muted myself. I don't know how I did that. That's a miracle. But Bruce, you had an interesting story there about drought and flood at the same time.
Yeah, 2011, Kim was talking about that flood that came down the Missouri River. That was all snow melt and some rain up in Montana that came down the Missouri. And I talked to a farmer up here on the north side of Kansas City, out in the country there. He had a parcel of land. Part of it was up on the hillside and on the top of the bluffs. That same parcel of land went down to the riverside, and he had to file for crop losses, 100% crop losses. And down by the river, it was flood, and up on the hill, it was drought. It was the same parcel of land destroyed by both drought and flood in the same year. Because it wasn't raining around here, but that river was high.
Water everywhere, and nary a drop for the crops. That's terrible. John Olshu, we're sure thankful you were here tonight to answer our email question. And what you been up to down there in South Alabama since Hurricane Sally blew through?
Well, you were asking about weather. So we've had an interesting 2 weeks. We had grapefruit size hail here on the Gulf Coast at Orange Beach. We had 6.5 inches of rain in 30 hours. We had severe weather, what was that, 2 or 3 nights ago in Bruton. And let me show and tell right here, because this is going to be interesting. So we had Hurricane Sally back, when was that? September, October? I'm not a good meteorologist. I can't even remember the hurricane.
Must have been September.
Yeah, so I'm going to open the window here, and you guys get to see debris fires still from Hurricane Sally out there. I don't know if you can see it that well, but anyway, I'm burning trees still out there in the field outside our house. So anyway,
have you been burning them since September, John? Are they
that's
continuously burning?
Yeah. Well, when you can, when you've got the right weather conditions, and weather has gotten good enough here, and our burn ban, ADM burn ban, goes into effect here at the end of the month. So it's kind of, the pressure's on. My wife rides horses out there, and she got on me today that those had to go. So anyway.
Well, there you go. There's your honey-do list for the next couple of days. So there you go, John. But we're thankful to talk to you and see you again.
Thanks for having me, man. Anytime.
Yeah. All right, real quick, picks of the week. I've kept everybody up way too late. We'll wait another minute or two. James will probably come back. Troy, you got a pick of the week for us? Oh, you may be muted, Troy.
Pick of the week this week is actually the NOAA press release that came out today. If you did not see it, NOAA put out the press release that Raytheon Intelligence and Space will lead the new center dedicated for advancing U.S. weather forecasting. Interesting story. I'm interested in seeing what Cliff Mass's response will be to that when we get a chance to see that in his blog. but that was announced by NOAA today.
Going to triple that supercomputing capacity. You think they'll be able to keep NWS chat alive, Troy?
Hopefully that it's not tied to that, because we need to get this done now. But yes, I'm confident we'll be able to get something done before too much longer. The pressure is on.
There you go. Chris Darden, any comments on that, a pick of the week?
I was going to comment on NWS chat, or
you probably can't talk about it, can you?
No, run, Chris, run.
What was it? Terrell Owens' agent kept saying in the interview, "Good question, next question, great question, next question." I'll go to my pick of the week. I'll give a kudos to the Huntsville and the Birmingham staff. They put together a really good page commemorating April 27th, 10 years. So if you go to weather.gov/BMX, or probably the Huntsville page as well, at the very top it's highlighted. It's a kind of a GIS oriented page, and it goes through a lot of the history of the day. And also, if you have not told your story today and you like to tell your story, or how you were impacted or your family was, there's a link on there. You can tell your story, and it actually just plots you right in there, and you can go through and look at the other stories that have been added. So it's a really cool opportunity for you to kind of tell your story and kind of get included.
Yeah, that was going to be my pick of the week, Chris. I'm glad you brought that up. You deserve credit for that one. So I'll go to my secondary pick of the week, which is our friend of the podcast, Johnny Parker. He's going to be doing minute-by-minute tweets tomorrow in real time of what happened. As you know, if you listen to the show very often, Johnny and his family in Smithville, Mississippi were directly impacted by that tornado that day. And it's, of course, had a big impact on Johnny's life. And just a fine young man, a fine, tremendous family. So if you get a chance to follow Johnny Parker 012, Johnny Parker 012, I think you got a treat in store for you tomorrow. So that'll be my pick of the week. Jim Stefkovich, pick of the week from you. And I know you got a comment there, since you're not constrained by any rules, unless they just cut off your retirement or something.
Well, so pick of the week is really reviewing the April 27th from both the Birmingham and Huntsville offices, and the stories that were told, especially by the Huntsville office, of survivors. That was really good stuff. There was a national customers webinar that I attended by Weather Service headquarters, and concerning chat, it's looking like they're going to have a small group of offices, not named at this point, that I believe, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, that the beta testing will begin, but not until October, as far as the new chat software. So
there you go. And we have confirmation. Yeah, one of our listeners wrote in and had like questions for a deposition, what did they know and when did they know it? And I was like, just let it go. It's just not worth it. Kevin, just let it go. It's just not worth it, right?
At this point, no, it's not.
Kevin, you got a pick of the week for us?
I sure do. Not enough credit is given to our folks in our office who work really tirelessly to document every single severe weather event that we have. So if you go on our homepage and look at the storm surveys page, we have selected surveys really going back to the 1800s, but in the modern era, I would say, since probably 95 forward, our folks have mapped out, documented every tornado, every picture, every tree, every twig, everything that's happened, and it takes a tremendous effort to do this. I mean, a tremendous effort. So I think in the weeks after April 27th, I think it took us probably 8 to 10 weeks to get all that surveyed and wrapped up. But that happens for everything, every little EF0 all the way up to the EF5. So take a look at that page sometime, and if you're ever curious, a historian's dream is to go in there and take a look at all those tornadoes from the past. And but just know there's a lot of good people. I'll call out Gary and Tara Goggins work really, really hard as far as putting those write-ups together, and it's all right there at your fingertips. So there are people who are behind it. That's not automated. So So I really appreciate that. So check out that storm surveys page on our homepage there.
Yeah, we need to get Jim on the show sometime. It's Jim Westland, right? Who's done the Alabama Tornado Database.
Yeah, he and Mark Linares have done that, and they try to go back and tirelessly document every at least significant tornado going way back, and then pretty much all of it. But they keep all those stats for the state, and it's probably one of a kind, to be honest with you. It really is.
Well, I was digging around over in the office on 11 West Oxmoor Road in the fall of 1974, and that's how I really got into weather. Ended up doing a science project my 9th grade year on tornado climatology of Alabama, and it's just the bare bones of what these guys are doing now. But it looked impressive on paper, that was for sure. But Kevin, we're sure glad to have you with us tonight. So we'll have to get together soon. Kim, finally coming around to you. We're almost drag it here for another 5 minutes. We'll probably get Span back.
Yeah. So my pick of the week is just my report that I wrote on the quick response. I got a quick response grant from the Natural Hazard Center to come out and do the work in Alabama and Mississippi. So it's a kind of a rougher form than my dissertation because I didn't have the full transcripts to work with yet. I didn't do the official academic-ese, with all of it, but it might make it a more interesting report in some ways for people to read. It's really kind of getting into how did people process that much stuff going on that day? How did they use various kinds of weather information, especially in concert, to make sense of the events as they unfolded and make the decisions that they made? So if you're interested in digging in a little bit more into those findings, then the report is going to be on the website.
Well, we're thankful that you got that grant because it brought you to Alabama, and that's how we met you. And your work is amazing, Ken. Thank you for being here tonight. Bruce Jones, you always have a great pick of the week for us. Blow us away, sir.
Well, I just texted that I don't, but here's an idea. I would like to have an app on my phone that uses all the SPC storm report data, so that when I'm driving down the road, it tells me I'm currently crossing the path of the such and such tornado. So one of you smart people who's listening now, come up with that app, please.
It's always interesting because you are in the footprint of a tornado just automatically, even if you've never driven down that road. You can just feel it. It's just a scary thing. So, well, since you didn't have a pick of the week, John Olshey's got two. John, what you got for us?
So first off, I don't know if everybody knows this. It seems, I don't know, common knowledge, but maybe it isn't. But all of the hours of the April 27th coverage are available on YouTube. Span uploaded them, and he usually does that for each event. And so if you're wanting to go through and kind of piece together what happened April 27th and the timeline there, that's a great place to start, especially for budding meteorologists and TV or meteorologists and broadcasters, that if they want to see how that was done and everything. So I highly suggest that. The other thing is, and you guys may have mentioned this before because I'm not a regular on here, but down here on the coast, we have lots of lightning, and I like to see where it hits and then see if I can hear the thunder and the spherics across the water, and how far it can carry. You're only supposed to be able to hear it about 20 miles out, but I can hear it, 30 and 40 miles out if it hits in the right place off of Dauphin Island and comes up through the bay. But lightningmaps.org, if you've never heard of that, or if nobody's ever mentioned it before, is a great live lightning data source for just hobbyists, because it draws the little concentric circles for the thunder out from the lightning strikes, and I can time it and see if it actually is going to get here. Anyway, I like that site. So there you go.
That's pretty cool. Just because you're not on here regularly doesn't mean you can't come back anytime, John. There's standing invitation.
Will. You let me know when you need somebody to fill in.
Oh yeah, we'll have you anytime. Alan, did I get your pick of the week, Alan? I'm getting old. Drove 8 hours today and can hardly think.
You didn't, but I'll just real quick. For my pick of the week, I'll give the emergency management community in Alabama and Mississippi. You talk about unsung heroes, and I was sad to learn that one of the colleagues from the emergency management community that I worked pretty closely with when I was MIC back there in Jackson passed away over the weekend. And it just reinforced to me, and this conversation tonight reinforced to me, that there's a lot of tremendous public servants in Alabama, Mississippi, and all across the country who do an awful lot, oftentimes, especially in rural areas of the country. They do an awful lot with not a lot of resources and often for not a lot of pay. And I just want to recognize them and all the work that they do to, in the weather community, we put the forecast in the warnings out, but those folks are the ones that do a lot of the on the ground work to get that information out and to help people before and after weather events and other disasters. So that's my pick of the week, Bill.
That's outstanding. That's a great one, Alan. Well, I just want to thank Nate tonight for the outstanding job he did. I'm sorry he couldn't stick around. I let him get away without getting to say goodbye to him, but he did a fantastic job. Each and every one of you means so much to me personally, as friends and as colleagues. And I thank you for your support and your experience and the knowledge that you've imparted to me over the years. So, Troy, unless there's something else, I'd entertain a motion that we adjourn. I think that's it. And I think I heard a second there somewhere. WeatherBrains is the weekly netcast. It's all about weather. We do this little labor of love every Monday night, generally at 8 p.m. Central Daylight Time, unless there's some extenuating circumstance. But next week, Jim Ledoux will join us. He's going to take tonight's conversation into the future, talking about resilience. He's put together a bang-up panel that you won't want to miss. So the great string of shows that we've just had all year will just continue rolling along. But until next week, when we'll be glad to spend time with you again, I'm guest booking officer Bill Murray, wishing you a great week and telling you to keep an eye to the sky, because you'll always have something fun to look out. Thanks everybody for being here. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, it was great.
I thought for a minute I was going to be able to get back on the show here. Wow. What a show. I think that was therapeutic for all of us. We could talk about this day for a long, long time. And I know that for most people, it's not personal. It is for us. Everybody on the show that you heard from tonight, it's very personal. And talking about it in a setting like this with friends you've known for a long time, you've worked with, you've been through battles with, It's very therapeutic. All those men and women on the show tonight, we have been through so many battles together. We are weather warriors. And seeing Alan Gerard and Jim Stefkovich, the MIC at the time of Jackson and Birmingham. Chris Darden was up in Huntsville at the time. Kevin Laws, goodness. And of course, my people, Jason Simpson and John Oldshoe. I mean, goodness, it was just great to be on, just being with Jason and John again. That was a treat. I look back on that day in that room, Studio A, which is across the way here. I don't think I'd want to be with anybody other than Jason. I think we were just kind of destined to be together on that day. And again, we were so far from perfect. I've watched more of that replayed coverage in the last 2 days than I have, I guess, ever, because I had to put together a montage of the coverage of that day, scope it down to about 10 minutes for this special we're doing tomorrow night. And, we made mistakes, and I don't play the mental gymnastics, the blame game. That's arrogant, because I'm such a small part of this big cog, this warning process. There were mistakes made, but I do know, like we talked about on the show, that there will be a time to celebrate the lives that were spared. But anyway, tomorrow night at 7, I will do just me. And again, the way I wanted to do it, I didn't want to go on television. I didn't want to have to do a 28-minute thing or a 58-minute thing. I mean, if I need to go 41 minutes or 17 minutes or an hour and 17 minutes, just let me go. And there'll be no breaks, and it's just going to be me and me only. And again, I appreciate all the anchors and the reporters, but I lived it. It's my story. And I just need to talk about it and say some things and share a little bit about some of the people and talk about some of the lessons learned from that day. But I think back on 10 years ago tonight, that sleepless night, you finally doze off about 2 a.m. and then you get rattled out of bed about 3:30 by that early warning that you didn't really expect. And that morning round was just something. But like everybody talked about, we missed it. People say, what was it like working April 27th? I really don't know. I was so busy. I was so hung up in the logistics and in the data flow and being coherent. I just didn't think about the historical nature of the day. And typically in a career, you'll have one day like that in your defining moment. And for a generational event, we had one in 74, we had one in 32. The next one we have one will be in 2050 something. And I won't be here then. But again, we have to take what we've learned and apply that. And I think we have. I look back at the March tornadoes, and I think, we've really come a long way. Our messaging is clearer in terms of telling people what they need to do to be ready, and getting the public involved in calling and texting people and wearing helmets and not depending on sirens and all these things. And I think this year it's starting to pay off. We've still got a lot of work to do with mobile homes and people that live in them, but that's something we'll keep working on. So anyway, I got to go. I got a busy day tomorrow. I got interviews at 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It's going to be all day thing. But again, if you can, watch us tomorrow at 7. And again, it's going to be on the ABC 3340 live stream on the website and the apps and all that, but also on Facebook. And I'll put it on my page too. So if you get a chance, watch that. If not, we'll post it up later. So thank you guys. And again, thanks to everybody for being on the show. This was a really special one. And I want to go back and listen. Like I've said before, my favorite thing to do is to listen to this show in the car in the days after we produce it, because again, I'm the button puncher guy and I'm busy and I'm here at work. And when I'm in the car driving down the road, I'm not distracted and I can really listen to it. And I look forward to that because again, so many great friends were on the show tonight. So thank you guys for watching. We'll see y'all next Monday night for WeatherBrains. Have a great weekend, guys.